Salutations, Legion of Doom. Welcome to Podcast The Storm, where we're social awkward podcast, crazy weirdos, and all around nerds convene to talk and debate all things pop culture. With me, as always, is my co-host, the nerdy occultist, aka the Authenticator, Dalton L. Mortimer.
Hello, everyone, and yes, I know, one more week until Multiverse of Badness, wherein Dalton will probably be very, very upset, so you will have that to look forward to. But we still have one more week.
Yeah. And I am your host last time, well, wannabe, the brainstorm of pop culture. How's everyone doing tonight? Hello, Ed Brewer.
Hey, Ed. How goes it?
Okay, so yeah, we got kind of a stack of things going on. There is a topic that we were asked to cover, but I didn't want to make it a whole section because I didn't really think it was as important. Yeah, Elon Musk buying Twitter, kind of my general thoughts on it, and we're just gonna move on from that. Personally, I don't really care. I don't really think it's going to change much on Twitter, honestly.
And I guess I'm the more optimistic one in this case because I am fully on team based billionaire, hashtag based billionaire, because Elon Musk strikes me as the one last rich person who actually doesn't hate himself for being wealthy and who knows how to actually use his wealth to enrich both the world and himself and isn't ashamed of it. So you go Elon Musk. That being said, it seems like Twitter is starting to fuck around with the shadow banning algorithms again, in the hopes that when Elon takes the captain's chair in a couple of months, when the deal actually goes through, they won't get caught with their hand in the algorithmic cookie jar. And the ironic thing for them is, normally, if you have the capacity to look at the algorithms, you have the capacity to look at different versions of the algorithm from the past as well. So unless they are very, very careful with how they hide their dirty laundry on that one, Elon Musk is if Elon Musk wants to do a show of good faith, don't just make the most recent algorithm transparent. Make all of the previous algorithms transparent as well, so we can actually see the progress of the algorithms. Right. If you're listening, Elon. Also, Elon, since Netflix is also being fucked over currently, try buying Netflix and making it better again, because that would be good. But that's my 2 cents on the matter as well.
Well, full transparency, I'm not really on Twitter often, so I don't really have a horse in this race, to be honest. So,
well, I mean, it's good because social media is one of the ways that the establishment likes to control everything they can. So,
Okay. Anyway,
I mean, I'm not in favor of billionaire overlords, but if we must have one, I'd much rather it be Elon Musk than Jeff Bezos or Jack Dorsey. So, yay, Elon Musk. If again, not in favor of billionaire overlords, but if we must have one, I prefer the based one who knows about how memes work and is in favor of free speech and is a genuine like eccentric mad lad. So given the options, I'm hitching my wagon to Elon Musk.
Right. Anyway, moving on to our first thing that I believe Dalton sent this to me. This is from cracked.com. Doctor Strange's Infinity War prediction is ethical trash. This is by Ryan Menez, published April 25th, 2022.
I suspect this is going to be a very contentious article because the title is very contemptuous, but I'm willing to hear the argument on this one because I don't really have a dog in this fight because while I find the Strange sacrificing himself for Tony Stark thing and the 1,605 to 1 ratio interesting, there probably are other alternative ways they could have won that didn't involve Tony getting fucked over. So there's that. But then again, as we see in What If, when Strange uses the Eye of Agamotto like that to relive timelines, he literally has to relive them. So if each loop lasted roughly 1 day, like we see in the movie, then he has lived like 18,000 years worth of lifetimes if we're taking each loop is 1 day and there's 14,605 of them.
I think that's where he messed up because he didn't do the actual math on that like you would. But yeah, full disclosure, I've known about Cracked for a while, mainly from their YouTube channel that I used to watch a lot. When they actually produce some interesting stuff. And hello, Slyther.
Hi, Chrono. How are you?
Yeah, Chrono. So yeah, I used to watch their channel a lot, like years back. Mostly like their after hours stuff where they discuss movies.
Unfortunately, I think it's very obvious that especially recently Cracked has cracked. Ironically.
You were waiting to use that, weren't you?
Oh, come on. You can't honestly blame me for that one. They brought that one upon themselves.
Dom, I'm just disappointed because you took the easy. It's so easy, you know.
What, you mean it didn't crack you up? There. Redemption.
No, that was still too easy.
Anyway, let's get into some actual ethical and philosophical argumentation for once. Yay, my speciality.
I think that. An hour or so into Avengers Infinity War, Dr. Strange says, I went forward in time to view alternate futures, see all the possible outcomes of the coming conflict. He viewed 14,605 possible futures. How many of these saw the heroes win? Just one.
Yeah. Which, yes, is a fuck of a lot less than the infinite opportunities they had, but given again that as we saw in What If, he has to live through each one of those.
Well, I was also going to say they were technically also on a time crunch because Strange, while was reliving them, times like around him still seemed to be flowing still. So
yeah, we don't know what the rate was, but if Mantis was able to notice, then obviously time was still moving.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I will admit that is somewhat of a flimsy argument, but it is still a point.
No, my main argument is how much of this are you honestly expecting him to endure? Because in each one of these, they lose, which means that he has to watch his friends and associates, not to mention frequently himself, probably die over and over and over again.
Probably
so.
too. probably violently as well. So
Yeah, given how the actual fight on Titan went in the movie, and this is supposedly the good one where they win at the end. Um, how many of those do you expect he had to live through hundreds upon millions of times? So, yeah.
um, anyway, moving on.
Yep.
Okay. Every time this scene comes up in discussions, and if you're surprised this comes up often, it's really overestimate the quality of my conversations.
Okay, a
I,
little bit of self-depreciating humor is good. Well done. Correct.
I point out it doesn't mean the gang had just one way to win. Strange didn't manage to see all possible outcomes. He just saw 14 million of them. And 14 million isn't that many futures compared to infinity.
Yes, but one, as we saw in the Doctor Strange What If episode, he has to live through all of them. He doesn't just get to watch passively from the outside. He literally has to live through each of them. And how much can you expect a man to take? Getting brutally murdered 14,604 times
Five.
and finally getting one that's good, is but by the time he got to the one that was good, he was probably like, "Oh fuck! Finally, I get to be done." Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, they could have said he viewed infinite futures since he's a wizard, and that would tie into the movie's title, but they didn't.
Do you have any iceberg tip of a idea how much infinity actually is? Like, even if he can view a million futures a second, that's still 14 seconds of time. Infinity is several factorials more than that, mathematically speaking. So even if he had hours upon hours of time to peruse the, alternate futures and whatnot, it would take a literal infinite amount of time, assuming that, again, we don't see much time passing when he views 14,605. But we do see some time passing, and therefore you'd need an infinite amount of time to view infinite amount of futures. Not to mention, once again, he doesn't just get to passively examine these futures, he has to actually live through them. And even if he could just, pull it up like a movie screen and just watch each of these futures happen, given that he knows all the people involved in these futures, not to mention himself, he still has to physically see himself and the people he cares about die over and over and over again, not to mention the millions of people who die in the snap, but never the fuck mind. Um, so, like, even if it were just a visual, like he can watch them as though it's on a movie screen sort of thing, that's still psychologically traumatizing. And when you throw in, he also has to live through all of them as per What If, that's just like he because we know he's done this before, like he did in his first movie with Dormammu, but each loop there only lasted a few seconds, and he still repeatedly died over and over again. So even if he can survive, millions upon millions of lifetimes doing that, how much can you expect a man to take, especially given that he's already done this once? Like, he's already bearing the scars of every single time Dormammu killed him, and he remembers all of them. So, like, again, even if we're talking just viewing it on a TV screen in his head kind of thing, he still has to A, remember all the details there because he has to know what details he hasn't changed yet so he can look at a different future. And he still has to deal with the psychological ramifications of watching himself die repeatedly and everyone he cares about and the world at large or the universe at large millions upon millions of times. To say that he was unethical for stopping at the one where they win kind of ignores the fact that he either had to watch 14,605 or 14,604 times where they didn't win, or he had to live through 14,605 times where he and his friends died violently and then failed. So, like, what 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 are you expecting from this man? I mean, given that he's done this already, I guess it's not as hard the second time around after doing it with Dormammu, but he's also still bearing the psychological scars of having done it with Dormammu once already. So, like, how much more can a man be expected to take? Now, granted, there is an actual argument against him here, which is if he had some measure of control over what was different each time, like Jane Chatwin in The Magicians, if there is an argument to be made for the fact that he shouldn't have taken 14,605 times to get the fuck over his overprotectiveness of the time stone and consider giving it up. And that's his arrogance for you. He had to die 14,604 times before he finally got to the one where he goes, okay, fuck it. I don't know what else to do. Give him the time stone. Let's see what happens. But still, that's not the argument you're making. The argument you're making is, but 14,605 is so much less than infinity. Yes, because a mortal man, no matter how heroic, should not be expected to go through 14,605 lifetimes of pain or watching them from the outside and then come away not psychologically damaged at all. Moving on.
Well, Cycloclaw says 38,000 331.7, I'm rounding up, years.
Yes, that was how long it would have taken him to live through 14,605 timelines, assuming that each of them was averaged about a day. And that's more if any of the timelines took, say 5 years, like we know this one did. So assuming that he had to live through all of the time in between his own death and whenever they got back, which I see no reason to think he didn't have to, like in his astral form, sit there and wait for 5 years, because that's the conceit of the time stone. That's even more insane. So I'm being somewhat conservative in assuming that each loop only lasts one day and Thanos just kills them all in front of him and painfully. But assuming that it's longer than that each time, then this is even longer.
Moving on. Well,
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, it's like Chrono says, could have studied a lot of magic in 38,331 years with close to 40k years experience. Can't cast a spell a kid can fuck up.
Well, okay, but that one's on Peter. That one is on Peter because the standing practitioner's rule is once the circle goes up, you shut the fuck up and let me work. That's how that works. You do not badger someone when they're in the middle of a fucking ritual circle. I don't care how experienced they are, it is unethical to do that to a magical practitioner. Once the circle is up, you shut the fuck up and let me work. That is Magic 101.
Right. Yeah, everyone wants No Way Home. There's a great Spider-Man movie. Anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Out of 14 million odds, isn't even that unlikely. 1 out of 14 million odds isn't even that unlikely compared to how crazy probability can get.
It's 14,605. Stop rounding down. You should round up, if anything.
Many unremarkable, highly specific things that happened to you today were actually less likely than that. That's how chaos theory works.
But this isn't just chaos theory. This is also the factor of a human psyche has to withstand all this, either watching himself get brutally murdered in 1,000 new and intricate, interesting ways for however long it actually takes, or he has to actually live through them all. In which case, you're expecting a human mortal psyche to withstand 14,605 days at least of trauma and watching his friends, everyone he knows, and the entire goddamn universe be split in half at best. Because there are probably quite a few of those timelines where literally every single member of the Avengers died before they even got a chance to stop the snap. So, yeah.
All right. Hey, Dragon Turtle. We're reading. What was it called again? Doctor Strange's Infinity War prediction is ethical trash from Cracked.com.
Yeah. They're basically making the argument that Strange was being lazy for only seeing 14,605 timelines when there are infinite possibilities. To which my response is, if we're assuming, and I have no reason not to assume, that it works like it did in What If with Supreme Strange using the Time Stone, he has to live through each of those timelines, and even if not, even if he can watch them like on a movie screen, he still knows each of these people personally and feels a responsibility for the world and the universe as a whole. So even if he was just watching it like it was on a movie screen in front of his eyes in his head each time, he still had to sit there and watch as each time himself and everyone he knows and the entire universe eventually gets destroyed and then split in half in numerous torturous ways that I can't even probably conceive of. So it's unreasonable to expect him to just withstand all of the pain so that they can find a better future.
Dragon Turtle, there are only so many that matter, though. Only so many actions people can take that matter. It doesn't matter if some bug on the other side of the galaxy goes right or left.
This is true. It's given that he only had available to him the variables that he thought would actually change things, which I'm gonna be charitable and assume he can control what changes in each loop, kind of like Jane Chatwin from The Magicians. Um, that's still a hell of a lot to expect one human psyche to withstand, especially when he's already withstood a time loop like this in his own first movie with Dormammu killing him every couple of seconds. So, yeah. And there's the issue that I went into earlier of if he has to live through each version of this loop, then that means, let's say on average each loop lasts about a day. That means, according to the math that I did a long time ago and then forgot, but Chrono fortunately redid the math for me, he spent roughly 38,000 years watching people get murdered and watching himself get murdered every single freaking day. And then restarting all over again and doing it over. So if Groundhog Day is torture, then this would be maddening, and yet he still comes out mostly sane on the other end. So, so if anything, Strange probably deserves a freaking medal because whether it's actually having to live through it or having to watch it repeatedly, dude is carrying around some massive psychological scars on top of the massive psychological scars that he already got from fighting Dormammu.
Fighting's a lucrative term in that scenario.
Hmm?
Fighting's a lucrative term in that scenario.
Yeah. It's like I'm going to annoy you to death by dying repeatedly in front of you because you can't do anything until you kill me, and you're not going to be able to kill me. Nah.
All right. I want to get through a little bit more of this, and then we'll read the
Yeah,
comments, guys.
yeah.
Okay.
Instituting the usual rule, beginning, middle, and end of the article,
Yeah.
so that we can actually move forward.
And yet the movies do telegraph to us exactly what most people think they do. The gang had but one path to victory, the one that eventually unfolded. They talk about the prediction again in game, and right before Tony dies, Strange holds up a one finger as though to say, "This future here, where you do what you're thinking of doing, is the one possible way we win." If that's true, every single decision in the movies loses its significance.
He didn't say that. He didn't say that it was the only way they could win. It was just the only one he could verify because that was the only one he saw in 14,605 options. Which you can wax lyrical about how much smaller 14,605 is than infinity all the live long day, but that still is not a very that's still a not very great degree of odds for any reasonable decision, given that most of the time we show percentages in 100% intervals. What exactly is the percentage of 14,605 to 1 probability wise? I'm gonna hazard a guess that it's a factor of percent so small that it was honestly heroic of Strange to even withstand that many futures to get to the good one, or the arguably good one.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Uh, Infinity War is the rare movie where the heroes fail. It's a huge failure, and even resurrecting the dead 5 years later does not undo all the suffering it could have prevented. They fail not just because their opponent is better than them, but because of their own mistakes.
Yes, thank you, Peter Quill. Although to be fair, I'm sure one of the futures was Doctor Strange teleporting Peter Quill into a sun, so he couldn't do that, preemptively. But and it probably still didn't work. But in the future that we have, thank you, Peter Quill, you buggered the entire universe. You childish dickhead.
Um, okay. The Avengers broke up earlier, and as a result, they're unable to face a threat together and win. Don't do the math to calculate if they could have won together. In-game declares that this is so. Loki reveals the Tesseract to Thanos, thinking this is a step one in his latest cunning plan. But this is a miscalculation, and Thanos immediately kills him. Strange refuses to destroy his own gem, and so Thanos gets it and wins, and Thanos ends up destroying it anyway. These are all actions with consequences, but if we're told
Okay, stop. You're already bringing things that are inadmissible to this particular discussion, because everything before Strange thought ahead and casted the loop so that he could check the alternate futures is stuff that he could not have changed. So you're supposed to count it from the time he opens up the eye and does the looking into futures thing to the end of the movie. That's the that's the save point. The save point is Strange opening up the eye and looking forward. That's the save point. So you can't say Strange is responsible for anything that happened prior to making that save point. if you're gonna ethically judge Doctor Strange for shit, you really need to keep it to things that he actually had control over. Which is why I'm going with the Jane Chatwin style. He had the power to change shit in each individual loop. Because otherwise, then he's basically just going off rapid fire and seeing as many possible futures as he can with the foreknowledge that he already has and changing his own life. But even then, he only has so many options. So I'm being somewhat charitable to your argument by going with the Jane Chatwin he's able to alter the futures independently style of looking forward. If you want to go he's literally scattershot in the sense that he has to relive each thing that he doesn't have direct control over and only can change his own personal actions, then every spell that he chose to do against Thanos in the fight on Titan is a deliberate choice because presumably he went through his entire spell repertoire in the 14,605 combinations. He probably did that regardless, but even so, if we're assuming that he only has control over his own actions, then yeah, he he would have gone through every spell repertoire he had in the book. And he'd probably bebopped home back to the sanctum a couple of times just to double check. So he probably went through the entire library looking for a spell that could give him the edge and didn't find it. So yeah, moving on.
Right. Okay. All right. But if we're told there's only one possible future in which the heroes ultimately triumph, these bad decisions, which rightly have bad results, suddenly become good decisions nonsensically. What?
Okay. Yeah, I say that again. I missed something, I think.
Okay. These are all actions with consequences, but if we're told there is only one possible future in which the heroes ultimately triumph, these bad decisions, which rightly have bad results, some of them become good decisions nonsensically.
No. The fact that this is the only accounted for future where they win does not make any of the bad decisions they make any less bad. It just means that the cumulative effect of those bad decisions had an overall positive outcome. This is perfectly demonstrated by, and as much as I hate Endgame, this is the one thing they did right, by the fact that the only based on Strange's foreknowledge, the only reason that he let Tony live was because he had to die sometime later, which means Strange had to knowingly and willfully lead Tony as a lamb to the slaughter, which is further emphasized by the fact that um, when Tony asks Strange in Endgame, he says, "If I tell you, it won't happen." I.e., if you know you have to sacrifice yourself, you will choose not to. So I'm not going to tell you until the very last possible second because I know what a selfish dick you are, and I know that you only do this when your back is as maximally as possible up against the wall. Of course, he probably could have mentioned to Tony at some point in the preceding 5 years that, dude, you're focusing on the wrong thing. Focus on the stones, not the gauntlet, and then you can play hot potato with the stones instead. That probably would have resulted in several of the other options where they win, which that you can conceivably judge Train for because that is an action he could have taken that would have prevented this and didn't. Um, and no, I don't think he would have tried that in any of the 14,605 other options because that is a remarkably counterintuitive thing. But given that he saw the win state involve removing the stones rather than the gauntlets, he could have mentioned this when they were doing the tug of war on Titan. He could have said, "Guys, stop focusing on the gauntlet, worry about the stones," and then like 50 other possible positive futures could have happened. But for the sake of narrative, tension, and everything, you know, movie's got a movie. But So there are some things about this you can judge Strange for, but stopping at 14,605,000 instead of infinity, and making sure that everyone was in their proper place to do the thing that resulted in them winning is not one of them in this case. Moving on.
Right. Okay. Those examples happened before Strange's prediction, but the mistakes continue afterward. Quill messes up their plan to knock out and disarm Thanos, and this is a good scene. He acts poorly, consistent with his character, and they all suffer the consequences. Later, after traveling through space to build a weapon to defeat Thanos, Thor screws up the killing blow so he can deliver a final quip before Thanos dies. This is another in-character mistake that gets weight and consequences. But Strange tells us there's only one path to victory. That's bad logic.
You don't think those were the first two things he changed? You don't think those were literally the first two things he probably tried to do differently? That is remarkably uncharitable. Given how glaring of mistakes those two things are, I'm sure that was probably timeline 2 or 3 in the 14,605,000. Timeline 1 was probably send Peter Quill to the inside of a sun so that he can die and not fuck up this plan. Option 2 was, oh hey, Thor fucked it up too, I'm gonna try to change it on that end. But yeah, you're forgetting that you're simultaneously minimizing 14,605,000 possible changes, and also forgetting 14,605,000 possible changes that he tried that didn't work, except for the one that did. That's why I'm impressed by him in um in Infinity War, because given that he saw 14,605,000 possible futures, everything he does, every spell he casts, every choice or mistake he lets the others make or not make, is entirely deliberate because he has 14,605,000 timelines of foreknowledge. So he probably could have used more aggressive spells against Thanos, and he probably has tried to use more aggressive spells against Thanos in other timelines, and they didn't do as good. So he used the spells that he used in the Titan fight to distract Thanos more or less, and make him think that Strange was less of a threat, so that when he offers him the stone to spare Tony's life, he takes the bait instead of quibbling about it. And by taking the bait and saving Tony's life, he sets up a chain of events whereby Tony will have to sacrifice himself on or in Endgame, and then will be set up for win state. Yeah, so I'm sure he wanted to send Peter Quill into the fucking sun, or tell Thor to go for the head ahead of time. But in the 14,605,000 timelines, that was probably timeline 2 and 3 that he checked. So you can't simultaneously minimize 14,605,000 options and yet forget that he had 14,605,000 options. If you're going to ethically judge Strange, you might want to ethically judge him for shit that he probably did, rather than shit that he either had no control over, i.e., the previous timelines before the the previous event before the save point that he had no way of checking, or the one that he finally got to and was like, okay, this timeline seems minorly acceptable. I'm going to be okay with this one, even though it does result in me having to send Tony to his death. Which, does Strange not get any sympathy for having to knowingly and willfully send a colleague of his to his death so that the rest of the universe will survive? Does he not get any points for that? Because that probably did a number on his psychology, while we're keeping tabs on the things that probably led to Strange needing all the therapy afterwards. The knowledge of, I literally sent my friend to his death so that the rest of the universe could live. I'm a shitty person. Is he never gonna get any props for having to make that sacrifice? Okay, moving on.
Okay, those examples happened before Strange's prediction, but the mistakes continue afterward. Quill messes up their plan to knock out and disarm Thanos.
You already read that.
Sorry. I forgot to scroll down. It's my bad. Right, okay. Strange tells us there's only one path to victory. That's bad logic. If Thor beheaded Thanos before he could snap, Thanos would have won. And bad story. Suddenly, Quill choosing wrath and Thor choosing hubris over victory become the right decisions because both do lead to victory eventually, even though the
Again,
deserves to be true.
You're acting as though those weren't probably the first two things he changed when he had the power to change shit. Like, again, I know 14 million 605 timelines isn't much in the grand scheme of infinity, but it is a whole hell of a lot of possible changes that he probably made. And given how obviously glaring those two are, they were probably thing number one and thing number two that he tried. Again, timeline one the first do-over was probably, okay, Quill, you are overly emotional and can't be trusted, so now you get sent to the middle of a sun so I don't have to deal with you. And you, Thor, go for the head and not the chest so that it actually kills him. And it probably didn't work. Moving on.
Right, okay. Hold on, says me from 6 paragraphs ago. Surely Quill and Thor acting correctly would have also led to victory, and these just weren't within the 14 million futures Strange examined. Okay, but it's hard to see how Strange would have examined the finale of Endgame before examining the much more predictable immediate possibilities of Thanos getting degloved or axed. No, the movie is telling us the smarter choices would have failed somehow.
Yes, because those are probably the first things that Strange bothered to change, and it led to a chain reaction where they still lost somehow. Which is why it took him 14,605 tries to find the one that didn't fuck up. Because he tried all the more reasonable options, and they apparently still led to fucking disaster. And yes, there are probably other versions of the same events that didn't do that, but number one, there's only so much Strange can account for in these do-overs, like Dragon Turtle was saying earlier. Maybe in one future where, or maybe in one possible future where a bug was on the other side of Saturn's moons when they were fighting, that might have led to somehow via butterfly effect a version that was completely different. But given that either he has to watch 14,605 timelines, or more likely, given what we saw in What If, he has to live through each of them, the man can be excused for being a little bit traumatized, don't you think? After getting brutally murdered no less than 14,604 times, where it led to nothing, and then once where he had to sit in his astral form and wait for 5 years, hoping that they would finally get the win for once. Moving on.
Alright. Reducing the significance of our heroes' choices hurts how we perceive their bad choices, also hurts how we perceive their good ones. I'm talking now about the choice most directly connected to Strange declaring that they're in the one winning future. Tony's sacrifice.
Okay. Once again, if you're going to ethically judge Strange, you also need to take into account how traumatizing it must have been to watch someone who he has spent 14,605 timelines getting to know better sacrifice himself to his own death at Strange's own advisement. Imagine that. Imagine spending 38,000 years and change getting to know a group of people, and then the one you wind up becoming close to you, which I'm not I'm not even going to quibble about Strange and Tony getting close because they were already kind of getting close in just the one timeline we saw. So repeat that for 14,605 times, and I imagine he basically viewed Tony as a brother. But point being, he knows that each choice he makes has to be literally as deliberate as it can possibly be, because that's the one timeline he knows will end positively. And if he does even the tiniest thing differently, then literally everything goes to shit for at least the futures where we have confirmation for. So you tell me, you sit through getting brutally murdered and watching everyone else get brutally murdered 14,605 times, and then get to one where there's a marginally happy ending, but you have to sacrifice someone you like to their own death at your suggestion to get that win. You weigh those odds in your own head without the insulating distance of math, and tell me you would make that choice. Because frankly, I don't think I would make that choice. I think I would fail. I think I would suck in Strange's place because I could not make that choice. Especially if I had to watch a single day where I died and everyone around me died and the entire half and at least half of the universe died over and over again, and then make that choice. So view it from the character's perspective. 5 seconds. You have this foreknowledge, but any other use of it will ultimately cause you to fail. So it's either you sacrifice a friend of yours that trusts you implicitly to their own death and their own self-sacrifice, or literally everything is fucked, everyone you love dies, and the entire universe gets fucked over in 1,001 possible permutations of fucked upness. Okay, moving on.
Okay. Actually, before we do we are kind of at midpoint, so. Okay. You guys really like talking in the comments. Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna have a lot of comments, but this is an interesting discussion. The person making the article is very, very stupid, but this is an interesting discussion nonetheless. Which is why I want to cover it.
Okay, I'm just gonna pick here. Okay, Slide the Claw. You actually might want to consider the other point. He has no control of the reality. Okay, yeah, that's actually pretty further back. So, okay, all these choices affect reality, limiting possible results. Doctor Strange was a surgeon. It means he triaged the situation and limiting options to what can be done. I'm just trying to catch what. Okay, so I'm just going to bring this down into in the sections with who typed. Okay, so again, I'm just going through Slide the Claws right at the moment. No need to worry over mental health, just medical detachment. Okay. An interesting thought. This means he saw what happened in Spider-Man No Way Home. Part of the plan.
No. You can make the argument that he saw up until Endgame, but you can't really say he saw anything more than that.
Right. Okay. Okay. So Dragon Troll. Wait a minute. Why didn't they use the Infinity Stones at the end of the movie to bring them all back?
Because Thanos teleported to a random moon that they didn't have any idea where the fuck he went.
Okay.
So they could even if they killed Thanos, they couldn't have just gotten the stones back.
No,
Not to mention the fact that you have to be incredibly powerful to even hold the fucking things. So
no. The Infinity Stones at Endgame after Tony snapped.
because Tony wasn't powerful enough to sustain more than one snap.
What did someone else think?
We saw even the Hulk was like suffered a broken arm um over the snap. So
Okay. Jack Charles, technically, he did have the ability to travel through time, so theoretically, he could have went backwards.
yeah,
Uh,
but there's no reason that he would know why he should. He can view everything that happened in the various alternate timelines that he sees, but he can't view things that happened yesterday that would be relevant to this. Or I suppose he could have, but he's probably thinking, okay, given he's making the basic Batman style prepper argument of given that I know a conflict is coming, how do I prepare for this possible conflict? I know I'll look into all the various different ways I could try to do this and see how that affects things. Does one loop finds out what happened, changes something, does another loop, changes something, so on and so on and so on, 14,605 times. So like there's no reason for him to have thought to himself, maybe something maybe something I could have done yesterday would have helped. And there's also the question of given that he's already using the time stone to do the um video game save position thing, could he have also used it to do something else, or was it occupied with sustaining the loop? I'm gonna go with it was occupied sustaining the loop, and he probably couldn't have also used it to rewind time on top of that.
um, okay. Yeah. Okay. Hold on. If
We
we
were
are
on Dragon Turtle.
right, yeah. If we are going to ethically judge Doctor Strange, it should be for violating the Hippocratic Oath.
I mean, sure, because that's something that he previously established that he's obsessed with in Doctor Strange, even though it did come out of nowhere in that movie. Um, yeah, but I'm pretty sure he was making the I'm pretty sure he was making the surgical calculation of okay, either I'm going to lose all the lives, including my own, or I'm going to have to send Tony to his doom. I've tried 14,604 options, and none of them worked. Time to A, give up the time stone, which I'm not inclined to do, and B, unfortunately send Tony to his doom. And now I'm an asshole. And he's going and that's the thing. Based on clips of Multiverse of Madness, it sort of implies that he's always been torturing himself about that ever since. Like ever since Endgame, he has woken up every day thinking to himself, Jesus Christ, I let Tony die. And he died at my suggestion.
Wait. Okay.
God, God, I'm an asshole.
Okay. Dragon Ball meant more violating the Hippocratic Oath by using offensive spells.
Yeah, but that's the thing though. He doesn't really use offensive spells. Um, he always goes for a he always goes for a um illusion way or a cleverness way um or a way around a problem. He never does do straight up offensive spells unless he's absolutely certain that the person will survive the offensive spell. Like most often he does the most often he and the Ancient One and every other magic user we've seen does the astral slap out of your body thing, which I don't know why he didn't try that with Thanos. I'm assuming because Thanos knows enough about magic to use the Time Stone on Wanda after he gets it, and presumably he was the one who taught Ebony Maw how to use magic. Thanos was capable of controlling his astral form and therefore was an even bigger pain in the ass when he was in an astral form because nobody else could touch him but Doctor Strange.
Right.
Um,
All right. Can I move on?
Yeah.
Okay. We at Cracked have lots of fun calling out heroic sacrifices as dumb, but narratively, a heroic sacrifice needs to be a little irrational to work. If it's
No.
an arguable correct choice with no downside, it's not a sacrifice at all, nor heroic.
The
Okay, I feel like we have to talk about heroic sacrifices first before we get into that.
Okay, yeah, that is the single stupidest objection to heroic sacrifices I've ever heard. The point of the heroic sacrifice is supposed to be that it's a personal sacrifice of the hero himself. Tony does not win by sacrificing himself. He very much categorically loses because he's no longer alive at the end, don't you know? Yes, for Strange's literal cosmic chess game, it's a sacrifice that he is willing to make of Tony, but A, he has to now deal with the guilt of having done so, which tortures him inexorably, and B, the person doing the heroic sacrifice is Tony. And who the fucking hell said heroic sacrifices have to be irrational? The whole point of a heroic sacrifice working is that they have to be rationally effective, i.e., they have to make causal sense, i.e., sacrificing myself in this way will prevent harm coming to my loved ones or the universe or the multiverse or whatever. So a heroic sacrifice has to at least be causally rational, or else there's literally no point in doing it. Otherwise, it literally is just nihilism. I don't know where the fuck you got the idea that heroic sacrifices have to be irrational, either on the part of the person making them, or certainly not on the part of the person who is playing a literal cosmic chess game, as seen by the fact that he references being in the endgame, i.e., a chess metaphor. It's dickish of Strange to play chess with people's lives, but given that he tried probably every other conceivable option to him and had to sacrifice somebody, it's probably better that he chose to sacrifice Tony than chose to sacrifice other people.
Right. Hero sacrifice is dumb. What the fuck? Okay, Narcissus, Giant Turtle, and us Giant Turtle. It's so stupid how people aren't all selfish assholes. Me, the big smart. He said that honestly, very ironically.
Yeah, he's sarcastically mocking the stupidity of the argument like I do sometimes. And yes, I agree, it is really, really stupid. But does 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 the person writing for Crack not understand the difference between sacrifice in the narrative and sacrifice on a personal level for the character? Because again, it's great that Tony's sacrifice leads to literally everyone else being alive and everything, but he did sacrifice his life, and he doesn't. Unlike Strange, he can't just pop off into his astral form and go, "I'm just gonna linger here in the astral plane so I don't have to physically die." Yay! Like Tony doesn't get any do-overs unless you count Edith from Far From Home, and even that's just a contingency he has so that he can posthumously take credit. Keyword there being, of course, posthumously. He knows he's dead, but he gets to say, "Ha ha, even dead, I'm the hero." Hence, Edith. Moving on, though.
Claw, I will admit I did forget a couple of Edward's comments earlier.
Yeah, what did Ed say? I completely forgot to remind you to do Ed. I'm sorry, Ed. Anyway,
I'm
do
sorry.
Ed.
I'm trying to read through this article as well, and like there's a lot here too. So,
But yeah, Ed.
I'm trying. I'm trying to find the first comment. Uh, he, okay, 25. Okay, I'm just gonna start at the 825 one. He is human. How do you think he copes? Referring to Strange and how he was dealing with the, well, experiencing timelines and stuff.
With an immeasurable amount of fortitude, which is something I like about it's one thing that they did get unquestionably right about Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange's whole shtick is about I'm going to take the universe's weight on my shoulders so other people don't have to. That's a very key part of how Strange operates. So the fact that they were able to, albeit in a kind of bargain basement sort of way, manage that in the MCU is one of the few good things they've done by this character. Strange, Strange soldiering on through the pain and playing through the pain on the behalf of the rest of the universe is very much his thing.
Right. Okay. But okay. But infinite does imply the possibility. Actually, hold on. I'm trying to. No, that was a whole conversation they were having in the comments when we were. Oh, okay. Sorry, I missed that one. 829. Okay, with infinite possibilities, he could have held out for Utopia, but I'm sure he took the first one where folks at least lived. Would that be an
Yeah,
ethical?
that's my thinking too. My thinking is he soldiered on through 14,605 options and was like, okay, I finally got to one that isn't sucky, so unfortunately, I'm gonna have to do this. And I will torture myself psychologically for it later, but at least everyone lives at the end except for Tony. Yeah.
All right. But infinite does imply the possibility. Said that with. Okay.
I mean, yeah, but like we were saying, Mantis Mantis noticed Strange flipping through timelines, and that's how they all noticed that it happened, which means that there is some ratio of time in the real world time continuum versus the time that he's using for the time stone. So if he wanted to go through infinite timelines, it would have literally taken infinite time for him to do that. And I don't think Thanos is gonna sit there and wait and be like, okay, no, you're fine. I'll just get that time stone from you when you're done.
Right.
He's probably just gonna show up and be like, oh, I was expecting to have to fight the sorcerer, but if he's busy, then I'll just yoink that time stone from him, and now he's lost in the infinite timelines because he can't find his way back without the time stone. Yay.
Okay. Now I'm just gonna catch up here with Giant Troll Cyber Claws. They posted some stuff. Strange can literally quote Kenobi. Strike me down, and I will be a fucking awesome wizard ghost. What do you mean that isn't a quote?
It should have been the quote, to be honest with you, but
I feel like that's a reference to something, but I'm not. I feel like that's a reference to something. I just don't know what it is.
New Hope, strike me down, and I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
I know, but I feel like that quote itself is. I've heard that before. Whatever.
You're overthinking it.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway.
Yeah. Moving forward. We're still on the first topic. Jesus Christ.
I mean, it's only been an hour, so it's pretty on par for us.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Fine. But still, go ahead.
The way it usually plays out.
We'll get to your guys' comments when we get to the end of the article, just for time's sake.
Yeah. The way it usually plays out, the hero is thinking of dying. A friend slash their beloved screams at them, "Don't do it! There has to be another way." And perhaps there is another way. The hero isn't sure that way would work, and, and they so value others' lives over their own that they aren't willing to take the chance. So they sacrifice themselves, even if their decision was the wrong one in hindsight. It was the heroic.
No, that no, that's that's almost never the context. The context is if I die in the course of fighting this creature or this circumstance or this power or this being, it will prevent that circumstance, force, power, or being from hurting anyone else in the process. So I'm going to sacrifice myself to kill off this ancient evil so that nobody else has to deal with it. We see we see it in we even see it in something stupid like Rise of the Silver Surfer, where the Silver Surfer unleashes all of his power cosmic back at Galactus while he's at the core of the Galactus cloud, because Galactus is a cloud in that movie for some stupid reason, and disperses the cloud throughout the universe and thereby basically atomizes Galactus. Again, the stupidity of Galactus being a cloud instead of a being is one thing, but yeah, even in superhero comics and superhero media, that's not how self-sacrifice works. Self-sacrifice is I can't see any other option other than sacrificing myself to kill off this ancient evil so that the people I care about will survive. So I'm going to I'm going to essentially, to use another chess metaphor, be the poison pawn in this chess game. I'm going to sacrifice myself so that the overall end, the end game, can proceed apace, which is exactly how it's used in this context, except more literally than usual, because Strange literally is a cosmic chess master who had prep time and time travel or temporal anomalous capabilities.
Right. Okay. In game, on the other hand, if we buy Strange's predictions, this is the choice Tony faces. He can use the stones and die now, or in 5 seconds he'll die anyway when Thanos definitely destroys the entire universe, Tony included. Well, then that's not really a choice at all, now is it? It's like a version of the trolley problem when you're on the train and can either drive it over 100 trillion innocent people, then fall off a cliff, or it into, or drive it over no innocent person and fall off a cliff. Of course, you switch to the
Yes,
instant, but that's decision hardly an example of moral courage.
that's that's why that's why this sacrifice actually works better than both of them do, because Tony is a genius and so is Strange, and they have mutually come to conclusions based on my buddy was able to look at 14,605 timelines and knows for a fact that this one where I sacrifice myself is the one where we win. And yes, we can postulate about all the other possible options, but we have confirmation from a guy who is at least as smart as me. This is, probably Tony's thinking, that he looked at 14,605 futures and found one where we win, which Tony is probably capable of calculating the odds of that and thinks to himself, I could um I could irrationally hope that we could land in a universe outside of those 14,605, but I trust Strange's judgment well enough to know he probably checked all the reasonable futures, and this is the one where we win. So I'm gonna bite the bullet for everybody else. Go me. And also, Tony was probably sitting there thinking to himself, you know what? I might have to go out, but you know what? I'm going to go out in a blaze of glory. So when Thanos tries to taunt me, I'm going to say the I'm Iron Man thing again. Like, Tony probably literally thought about this in the last seconds that he was alive. Was like, you know what? I have to die, but I don't have to die like a bitch. So I'm gonna middle finger him while I'm snapping my fingers. Why not? Because that is a very Tony Stark thing to do. Is like, if I'm down to my last seconds alive, then I'm gonna throw a gauntlet in his face. Nah.
Uh, okay. Da-da-da-da. Which is fine if we're supposed to come away thinking Tony died just due to bad circumstances, but we're trying to sell this as the ultimate heroic act. Are we to believe that Tony, in his younger days, before he learned altruism, would have chosen to let the universe vanish with him?
No, but
That
that
would be the
okay.
only alternative. Sorry, I had to finish that. I thought that was a
Yeah,
period.
I know, but that's not the point. The point is, in fact, that he has changed in the course of his 10-year arc in the Marvel Universe. That's the like for as much as you people obsess over things like character development and themes, you would think you would understand the fact that this is literally supposed to exemplify exactly how Tony has changed. Before, he probably would have said, "You know what? Fuck the rest of the universe. I'm gonna win." But now he's been through the ringer, mostly self-inflicted in the case of Ultron, but he's been through the ringer enough times to know um, sometimes you got to put other people first. So I'm gonna do that. That's the whole point of the scene thematically. If we must obsess over themes, can you not forget how they work at the drop of a hat, please? I prefer not to have to obsess over themes, but in this case, I can take your standards and fire them back at you. So yeah, moving on.
Uh, shit. I had something, but I completely. Yeah, it's not right. I was gonna say this is a little weird thing that I just remembered, but in universe, it's actually more than a decade.
Yeah,
Okay, 2008. It's 10 years and plus five more.
yeah. So it was
So
like 2023.
end game. So that's 15 years, 15-year long character arc in universe.
Hmm. And
Uh,
he literally had to live through watching literally everyone he cares about get turned to dust, including his including his surrogate son, while screaming, "I don't want to go! I don't want to go! I don't want to go!" So, so Tony has paid his dues for earning this character growth. God damn it.
um, okay, even the biggest asshole in the world would choose to die on their own terms and win, if only because that way they leave behind a universe that venerates them. The
Yes,
fuck?
which is exactly what Tony did.
I mean, yeah,
Remember?
yeah,
He
he's a good guy, but he's still an asshole.
Well, yeah, and he again, he did literally set up a contingency plan called "Even Dead I'm the Hero" or Enid or Edith. Um, so like you're describing what Tony actually literally did to the letter because he literally flipped off Thanos with a snap of his fingers with the you may be inevitable but I'm Iron Man bitch moment, and then because he is a genius who is capable of contingency planning, created an armor set which he could give to his surrogate son, now knowing that his surrogate son would be back, and have it literally be called "Even Dead, I'm the Hero," which is basically his trollish way of saying, "Nah, nah, 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 you may have killed me, but I'm not gone, bitches." Yeah.
That would make more sense if the AI for Edith was a replication of Tony's personality.
I mean, yeah, but
I mean, the
he did
comic
he
didn't
didn't
they?
literally yeah, I know he did, but he didn't literally need it to be him though. He was fine with giving it to Peter and you know going, that's my boy from the grave basically. Like
Okay, all right.
of course it of course it ultimately ended up backfiring like most of Tony's plans do, and that's why the whole business with Quentin Beck dying and No Way Home happened. But let's let Tony have the win because he was able to give a gift to his surrogate son from the grave. So win.
Okay. Above all else, however, the Doctor Strange prediction is criminally unethical because the screenwriters are trying to fend off all possible nitpicking. There are no plot holes here. It says everything that happens, no matter you're complaining, is the only way all could happen. Nitpicking is how I make my living. Screenwriting team:
Okay,
Christopher Marcus and Stephen
no,
McBeal.
nobody said it was the only way. That is a straw man of your own creation. What we're saying is the man sifted through a gargantuanly large number, 14,605 timelines, that if we're taking um, the What If Doctor Strange episode as the example, he literally had to live through every single one. And if we're not taking What If as the example, he still had to sit there and watch like it was on a movie screen each time it happened. So either he's psychologically traumatized because he had to sit there and watch helplessly as himself and everyone he cares about, and also the universe, dies 14,605 times, or he had to literally live through it up to and including his death 14,605 times. So is it not unreasonable that because most people, let's be real, would have stopped after like 1,000 timelines. Like after about 1,000 times of doing this, they would have gone, fuck it. I'm satisfied with the notion that we won't win in any of these. I guess we're destined to lose. Blah. But Strange, in his infinite fortitude, which again is very in character for Doctor Strange to have, managed to do 14,605 timelines after having already done several million timelines of dying repeatedly with Dormammu. So not only is he carrying around the psychological weight of dying that many times, but also the stuff he did with Dormammu. The dude gets to say as soon as I get to one halfway decent timeline, I'm giving this a rest. Because if not, he's going to be in therapy for literally the rest of his life.
Okay. This
Moving
was
on.
last line of this article. When you make these pronouncements, you're taking food out of my children's mouths. The fuck?
What?
I don't
That
know.
is that is the most nonsensical non sequitur you could possibly choose to end a article with. Like th- this literally has nothing to do with. Oh, I guess because she's siding with Thanos and the whole half the population means double the resources thing.
Right.
So
Actually,
so in the utopian future Thanos was hoping to create, her children would have had more food. So
no, it's a dude.
Strange winning.
It's a dude.
Okay, well he is saying that Strange, and by the extension the rest of the Avengers, doing this means that Thanos was right all along, and that means that human population density, blah 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 blah. We don't live in a utopia with double the resources and half the population anymore. So it's literally a Thanos was right argument.
Mm-hmm.
So so the person who wrote this article basically ended on a Strange is stupid and Thanos did nothing wrong. That's totally not nihilistic or utilitarian or anything, and that totally doesn't instrumentalize literally half the life in the universe or anything, or half the sapient life in the universe or anything.
Okay. So give me a sec while I'm setting stuff up, but I'll read some comments just so. Okay. Dragon Turtle. I'm okay. Yeah, Dragon Turtle. I'm confused why Strange didn't just go back a year, assemble the Avengers, go back, go get Hulk, jump Hela in the beginning, and then all went after Thanos together.
Again, I'm going with the because the Time Stone could only do one thing at a time here, and it was busy sustaining the actual time loop. So he can choose to do the save point thing, or he can choose to do the I'm gonna go back in time and mess with shit thing. And given how many time paradoxes he probably would have thought about creating by going back in time, he probably was just like, no, I'll use this as a save point and focus on the future that I can change.
Okay. Still loading. So okay. Hold on. You don't think people would say, "Hold on, no, there has to be another way," and lose not being willing to go through with it? People have both hope and self-preservation.
Yeah, this is probably why it took him 14,605,000 tries, because he probably tried the version where everybody lives every single other time and was like, fine, I'll make some concession. I'll give up the time stone because that seems to be a problem, and I'll let Tony die because that seems to be a problem. Oh hey, that's the one where everything seems to work out mostly in the end. And I've done this 14,604 other times. I'm taking this one as a win. God damn it!
Right. Okay.
Which is an entirely reasonable calculation, I think, at that point.
Okay. Giant Troll. The problem is that they only understand irreverent cynicism and IRL political culture / cultural tribalism as the themes. I think that's
Yeah, that is very much the problem.
yeah. Why wouldn't he become desensitized at some point? Like strange regarding like the loops.
I mean, if it was repeating the same events over and over, maybe, but that's the thing, because he chooses to change events every time. Each wound is a fresh new wound, like one that he hasn't had or hasn't experienced before. So not only does he have to watch his friends, family, loved ones, and himself, not to mention half the universe, die over and over, but he has to watch it happen in new, fresh, and interesting ways each time. That's why he doesn't get desensitized, because it's not just replaying the same scenario over and over. A it's replaying a new scenario where you fail in a new way each time.
Okay. Okay. From the timeline dying, yeah, okay. What, yeah, we already explained the last part. Okay. Scyther Claw, they would have made a lot of enemies restoring the other half. Podcast the Storm, don't you know? You can always get a utopia by just killing enough people.
No. Fuck the
No.
greater good.
Yeah.
I think we're mostly agreed on that because we both have our various reasons of basically fuck the greater good.
Actually, regarding oh, Total, fair enough. I had assumed the time stone avoids paradoxes.
I mean, it can to some degree, but I imagine it's locked into whatever spell Strange is using, and the spell Strange is currently using is the, for lack of a better term, the video game save point spell. Which actually means that he didn't get to use the time stone in any of the other timelines he checked.
Right.
It's gonna hurt given that you know you have a time stone in your pocket, but you can't use it because otherwise no respawn.
Um, and there's actually a speech regarding heroic sacrifices and stuff where that came to mind, and I didn't want to bring it up because it was going to be a whole diatribe, like a whole like
Mm-hmm.
um going on a tangent, basically.
Hmm.
But I don't know if anyone here knows what red versus blue is. But this
I mean,
is
I know as much as you've told me about it.
right. Fair enough. For those who don't know, it's a machinima series, which is basically using video games as a form of medium to tell stories. Uh, that is produced by Rooster Teeth Productions, and Giant Turtle knows what I'm talking about. And it's basically like a comedy series that's really grown over like the decade or so, since it's also regarded as the longest running web series out there. Uh,
Hmm.
uh, and I'm referring to season 13, which is one of my favorite seasons of Red versus Blue. And the end of a character who sacrificed himself, known as Church or Epsilon, uh, and kind of context of that character is very much kind of Tony Stark in a way,
Mm.
maybe a little worse because he's like a full-on asshole and shit.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, and so like this is like the speech he says. There's so many good stories where some brave hero has to give their life to save the day. And because of their sacrifice, the good guys win, the survivors cheer, and everyone lives happily ever after. But the hero never gets to see the ending. They'll never know if their sacrifice actually made a difference. They'll never know if the day was really saved. In the end, they just have to have faith. Ain't that a bitch?
Hmm. And
So,
apparently this emotionally affected Dragon Turtle as well because now he misses church again.
oh yeah, dude, I was just like, when I first saw that, and I saw it when it came out, and I was like, I think I was 13, actually, 13 or 14.
And I will do you one worse, Dragon Turtle. Ahem. Karen Murphy. That is all.
But I think that it kind of sums up a lot of like how characters feel when they like who do make heroic sacrifices, especially "Ain't that a bitch" line.
Hmm. Which again strikes me as something very, very, very similar to Murph's Dread Sekka line before she shoots a Jotun with a rocket launcher. Because goddamn, Karen Murphy is badass.
Right. Granted, I have my own personal belief of heroic sacrifice. While I don't think it is, well, I think it can be necessary at times. I personally believe it is a greater challenge for someone to live for a cause.
Yeah, it's better. It's more challenging to live through it.
Yeah. Um, okay. So we should probably move on to our uh, yeah, our second article. I don't know why I'm spacing out so much. Anyway,
Well, if your still fucked up sleep schedule is any indication, that's probably why.
I don't think that's it. I honestly don't know. That it could probably be that. It probably is that actually. Right. Okay, so this is well, this is the archive version because we couldn't get to the actual one for whatever fucking reasons. Um, from Axios.com, I believe. It's published March 25th, 2022. We've been trying to get to this. That Sarkeesian reflects on 10 years of tropes versus women in video games. It's written by Megan Farrakananes. If I said that name wrong, I'm sorry. Unless the name is spoken to me first, I can't pronounce it.
Hmm. But yes, Miss Sarkeesian. I didn't have a presence much on YouTube the last time the last time you were relevant to anything. So I'm gonna just throw my bale of hay on top of all the other bales of hay that you've already been weighing under. But you haven't ever tangled with me yet, darling. This is gonna be fun.
I don't think we've ever actually done tropes versus women before.
No, we haven't done Anita. We've done her boy toy. We've done Macintosh.
Oh yeah, that was Pop Culture Detective, right?
That was after they broke up and he stopped being the producer on Tropes versus Women.
Uh,
But for most of the actual run of Tropes versus Women, he was the producer and funded most of it.
right. All right. All right. Decade after its creation, Tropes vs. Women, video games creator Anita Sarkeesian believes the series had an essential, undeniable impact in the games industry, not on the games industry. No, actually, that makes
No,
sense.
it
My
is
bad.
on.
Okay, yeah, impact on the games industry. I don't know why.
It probably would have made more sense for it to be in because that would mean that she cared about the games industry itself. But as per the famous clip, Anita doesn't care about video games except for as a cultural means to an end.
For
And
the record,
that's the fucking problem, you evil bitch.
right. Also, I want to put this out there. I do not want to cover tropes versus women. I've seen like so many other people have done it, and probably better than I probably can. So
I mean, we'll probably do one eventually, but we'll save it for a really big milestone, like 500 or something.
yeah. Um, okay. Moving on, or anything else?
Nope.
Okay.
Go forward.
Driving the news, reflecting on her work and its impact during a game developers conference talk on Thursday. Again, this is in March, so. Sarkeesian says that making those videos today might be not impossible, but harder as there are fewer examples and the pattern is less egregious.
Uh,
I don't really have anything
Anita.
to say because I haven't played video games in a while, mainly because there's nothing that really grabs my
Mhm,
attention these days. So
mhm. But Anita, I'm gonna say the same thing to you that I said to Jack Thompson all those years ago. A game doesn't have to be morally good by your standards or anybody else's standards to be qualitatively good. In art, morality is only so much fluff, unless you're literally trying to make a uh like moral of the story propaganda piece style thing, which only works for very, very young children for the most part. Um, Morally good and qualitatively good are two different fucking things, as well they should be, because most artists tend to be a little bit fucked up in the head. And I frankly don't want to get rid of every piece of art that was ever produced by someone who was a little bit fucked up in the head, because that would literally result in like 90% of all art ever being destroyed. Because artists, just as a general rule, are fucked up in the head, and that's what makes them good at arts.
say bye bye to Van Gogh.
And Lovecraft and and Gore Verbinski and Scorsese and Polanski and fucking Michelangelo, because you know full well every single one of those um Renaissance artists had like a lead paint in a lot of their paintings. So if lead exposure counts as a kind of mental illness, and it definitely should, um, then bye bye to all of the Renaissance masters. Bye bye to literally everyone before modern day cleanliness standards. Bye bye to even most of the Art Deco era people, because most of them were high off of either cocaine or heroin. Because back in the day, cocaine and heroin were both legal, and you could get it fairly easily over the counter. And and opium and everything, and especially opium, because that's like 90% of the arts from like the 1700s up through the late 19th century right there. So yeah, say bye bye to everything before prohibition pretty much. And if we count severe alcoholism as a kind of mental health issue, and we should, then say bye bye to Hemingway and basically every artist in the 21st century too. Yoink.
Dragon Turtle, and all their favorite Twitter porn artists.
This is also true. Bye bye to 90% of DeviantArt and Tumblr and Twitter, and just just don't judge art on moral grounds. You'll end up throwing away all the art. Is the long and the short of it. God damn it.
Dragon Turtle, are they shaming the neurodivergent?
Basically, because with people like Anita Sarkeesian or Jack Thompson or Frederick Wortham, any kind of mental disorder is grounds to be dismissed from the like realm of quote unquote valid art. So if we only are allowed to consume art from entirely sane and entirely moral people, according to these very strict like puritanical definitions, then like 90% of all the art is just now dead.
Okay. This will be the last one I read until we get like to the middle point. Dragon Turtle, just so you know.
Mm-hmm.
Don't judge people that way, or you will have to burn 98% of people because they stole gum once.
Yep. The Jean Valjean system of justice. I stole a loaf of bread because my sister was starving and she had a child. Well, sucks to be you. You're stuck in jail for 19 years, a slave of the law.
I actually like that movie.
Yeah, well, yeah. Les Mis is good, and I don't even mind the movie version really.
Well,
And I don't even mind Russell Crowe as Javert. Russell Crowe as Javert was actually pretty good, all things considered. But yeah.
Well, that's the only Les Miserables. Les Miserables. The way
Les Miserables.
that's how I always say it. So Les Miserables, whatever. That's the only way I know it because I saw it in like school. Anyway. Yeah. Okay. The past 10 years have been a grim reminder of how ubiquitous and pernicious racism, sexism, and transphobia can be in this industry, but they're also encouraging proof that but they are also encouraging proof that real progress is possible.
Sweetheart, you don't even begin to have a monopoly on the concept of progress. Because I hate to break it to you, but feminist morality is not the only moral system in human existence. And if we're judging things based on egalitarianism rather than feminism, you fail horribly on the grounds that men are still where women were a century ago in terms of rights and opportunities, given that we still, to this day in the Western world, circumcise baby boys, and we have stopped FGM in the Western world many, many centuries ago, as well we should, but maybe we should also think about stopping the other half, question mark. So yeah, you don't have a monopoly on progress, and your conception of progress is backwards and fucktarded. So be gone, you evil harridan.
Right.
Is the long and the short of that. Moving on.
Catch Up Quick in 2012, Sarkeesian kickstarted a video series critiquing different tropes in video games, such as damsels in distress or women as rewards.
And yet, you never once considered fighting the knight in shining armor trope at all. You know, the man who nearly kills himself against men, nature, and often the supernatural.
Oh my god.
So as to get that reward?
I'm sorry. I just remembered a Robot Chicken sketch of Legend of Zelda where where Link basically saves Zelda, right? But he refuses to return his affections, even though like he went through all the hoops and shit, and like it's fucking funny, man. Like, holy shit.
Right, but if we were at all concerned with being equality about this whole rigmarole, then surely the man who sacrifices literally everything for the woman's affection is also part of the problem here. I.e., you have to literally slay a freaking dragon before you get a moment alone with a princess. Are we ever going to address that half of the dichotomy? No, of course not, because men sacrificing things for women and women's affection and women's approval is how things should work, don't you know? Because otherwise, misogyny. But women shouldn't feel any pressure at all to give men affection after they've literally almost killed themselves and probably
Well,
some other people
I
in
mean,
the process of saving their
to
lives.
be fair, in the sketch, Zelda does give the thing of like he's a teenager and she's like a grown woman. I mean, it doesn't help that she brings up that she's
Okay,
been saved multiple times and says that the first guy who saved her, she fucked his brains out. I think that was the actual words there. uh,
oh,
I'm
okay,
sorry.
but to be fair, like yeah, no, that is funny. I've always just assumed that Link and Zelda were around the same age, so that might just be me. Um,
I think it
but
was for the.
yeah,
I think it was for the
although to be
sketch.
fair, yeah, no, it's funny, but yeah, it does make a like most funny things. It's one of those funny because it's true things. Because if we're demonizing the damsel in distress part of the equation in this day and age, then maybe we should also start demonizing knight in shining armor trope as well, i.e., men shouldn't have to literally kill themselves people and often fucking supernatural entities just for some nookie or affection or romance or insert women as war icon here. Like Anita is the queen um of men's hard work shouldn't be used to purchase women's affections, but never once does she ever mention, hey, maybe women's affection isn't worth all the work men put into it sometimes? Question mark. We're never allowed to turn it the other way around. It's always women shouldn't have to give men affection just because they do all this work saving us. We you should do all this work because it's inherently good, not because you'll get a reward out of it. But never once is a man or male character allowed to go, well, maybe your affection isn't worth all the work I put into saving you, bitch. That would be misogynistic. But somehow it's not misandrist to just assume men should do all the nice things for you and you shouldn't get any reward out of it whatsoever. Moving on.
Right. Okay. Did I read this? No, I did. Okay. Um, Sarkeesian and her work became an instant target for abuse and harassment for criticizing video games, misogyny, and otherwise poor treatment of women.
Okay, and are you ever going to flip it and look at the equation for men? Because 10 times out of 10, if there's ever a game where you have to kill a female character in order to advance, you have to kill at least 10 male characters before then. And usually the male characters you kill aren't even given like backstories or anything. They're just cannon fodder. Like they're a zombie horde. They're a the what do they call them? Goombas in the Mario franchise and so on and so. I'm making a lot of references to like Mario and Zelda because herself makes a lot of references to Mario and Zelda in her commentaries. So in other words, you might sometimes have to kill a woman if it's a particularly hyper-violent game like a Fallout or a Grand Theft Auto or something, but in even the most banal games, you're killing default male characters. That's my point. So if we're supposed to hold to this, you shouldn't portray violence or harmfulness standard, then where is your where are your 10 videos about misandry, Miss Sarkeesian? I will wait, or I would wait, but given how long it took you to make the Tropesy Women videos you've made so far, several of which you still have outstanding, by the way, I'd be waiting until the rest of my life, I imagine, for you to get around to the misandry ones, even if you gave a half a fuck, which I doubt.
Okay. Sorry. Sarkeesian and her work became. Well, actually, no, did I already read that? Yeah, I did read that. My bad.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. During Gamergate, Sarkeesian was one of several women specifically targeted with death threats, rape threats, and bomb threats at events she was speaking. She said that abuse
Evidence,
continued for the
please.
past decade.
Evidence would be nice. Evidence that actually constitutes the thing you're accusing them of. Because this is the thing. Go ahead.
Well, I was just no. It's not important to like that thing. It's just when they actually kind of start talking about the tropes, I guess, that she brings up. I'll talk about it, I guess, because I have brief. I don't really remember those videos because I wasn't really part of anything at that time because I was just kind of living my life and stuff. Because I don't know if many people remember this. I am kind of one of the younger members of this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm 20. No, I'd be 22 this year. Yeah, so I'm 21.
Yeah.
Wait.
It's sort of sad that you had to mentally double check that, but
No,
okay.
I'm 22. I'm 22 now. I would be 23 later this year.
Okay. Okay.
I'm sorry. Days
gonna.
blend together. Okay, days blend together lately. Okay, so.
Yeah, I know, but it's so. Anyway, apart from me busting Brainstormer's balls because I can do that because I'm one of his best friends, the thing with Anita and her specter of harassment, and by extension the entirety of like Game Journal Pros and their allegations of harassment. One, we question your definition of harassment because the things you throw into your definition of harassment don't constitute harassment under most reasonable standards. Number two, we question whether you provide any evidence of this harassment rather than just claiming it. And number three, we question your harassment claims getting special dispensation because the thing that they don't tell you on your first day on the internet that they probably should is literally everyone will at some point get harassed on the internet. It's a thing. The problem is feminists and third wave intersectional social justice feminists in particular came along and went, we're getting harassed, therefore we get special treatment. And the internet at large went, get over it, bitch. Literally everyone gets harassed. This is how the internet works. And that side of the argument is never heard because by the time the feminist has finished claiming, I've been harassed, give me special treatment, 1,000 journalists have gone, oh, you're being harassed? Let me white knight for you, my lady. We will vanquish all those evil trolls on that fictional dimension of the internet. It's literally the media itself either morally condoning the feminist claims of harassment by defending them, or it's people literally white knighting for them. And one of the things we've always asked, Anita, apart from do you have any evidence of this harassment of yours, and does it constitute a meaningful definition of the term harassment, is Why should you get special treatment when literally everyone on the internet gets harassed and most people are just capable of getting the fuck over it? How is your harassment any worse than the harassment that literally everyone else gets all the fucking time, you see?
All right. Sarkeesian has continued to be a prominent critic and force for change. She's since won major awards for her work, including a Peabody. We'll cover that in a moment. To be fair,
And yet
anyone
she gets to play. Go ahead.
to be completely honest, I don't think anyone gives a shit about awards anymore because anyone who's given them these days don't really deserve them.
Yeah, they mean nothing because it turns out when you change the standard by which you give awards, the awards themselves mean less rather than the people who get them meaning more. Much like many aspects of this whole social justice rigmarole. But it's funny that she gets all these awards and all of this attention and all of this clout in the games industry when the fans at large hate her. The normies who can be arsed to give half a fuck sometimes hate her, and yet she still gets to play the victim because somehow when it's in the moral dimension, the aristocracy white knighting for you doesn't matter as much as the fact that the peasants don't like you. You see, the fact that anyone opposes Anita Sarkeesian proves that she's a victim, and therefore, despite the fact that all the people with all the power and the influence like her and lionize her at the drop of a hat, the fact that some unwashed masses on the internet don't like her still proves that she's ultimately the victim of literally everything. And the people who are anonymous quote unquote trolls that she gets to demonize at the drop of a hat are totally not and never will be the victims somehow. Moving on.
Okay. Sarkeesian said in her talk that tropes help create conversations. It eliminated patterns of problems that have been had staring people in the face for what? No, staring. Okay, sorry, my bad. Help create conversations. It eliminated patterns of problems that had been
staring.
Yeah, I know, but whatever. Staring people in the face for decades that many of them have never even noticed before. I mean, okay, so I could kind of understand the tropes thing, man, because I mean, we're kind of in a time and place of human existence in terms of art, and storytelling, where everything has been done, and there have been universal like characters, archetypes, themes, yada yada. That
Yeah, but she's not objecting to tropes on the basis that they're overused or overhyped. She's judging them on the basis that they're immoral.
okay.
She doesn't care if a trope is overused as long as it's a good moral trope. Her issue is that the tropes that she cares about are immoral according to the feminist framework, specifically Bell Hook's feminist framework. But Anita, that presupposes that your moral framework is the correct moral framework to be judging things on. That presupposes that those ideological phantasms of yours unarguably exist. And this is the problem. Whenever someone actually tells you, by the way, that patriarchy you're so worried about doesn't exist. By the way, that misogyny you're so worried about is literally only possible if someone is literally brain damaged. By the way, that wage gap you're so concerned with is a case of people lying with statistics or being incredibly biased in the way they examine statistics. When people tell you that these ideological phantasms of yours do not mean what you think they mean, to borrow from the Princess Bride quote, or that the things you're drawing implications from could also equally imply other things that aren't immoral, you call that harassment. It literally could be from a positive perspective. Like someone could literally be telling you, "Good news, Anita. The patriarchy doesn't exist," and think that you would be over the moon about that, because if generally speaking, when someone is genuinely concerned with something, if someone can meaningfully demonstrate that it doesn't exist, like for example, a child who is worried about a monster in the closet, if a parent can convince that child that that monster in the closet doesn't exist, generally speaking, the child is happy because now they have less things to worry about. But when you tell a feminist that patriarchy doesn't exist, or the wage gap is woefully misapprehended and mathematically incoherent, they get appalled at you for taking their villains away. Because the thing is, feminists don't actually want to be freed from the patriarchy. They don't want to be freed from the wage gap, except for on their very specific terms, because they see it essentially as a war wherein they get to play the heroes slash victims, and everyone else is the victim, or is the villain slash perpetrator. And if you tell a person who is fighting a war against an evil villain that that evil villain doesn't exist, they're going to get offended at you, because if the evil villain goes away, they have nothing better to do with their lives. Especially if they perpetrate terrible crimes in the process of fighting those villains. Like, Infinity War would have been a much darker movie, for example, if Thanos didn't actually exist, but everyone assumed he did. That would have been a much darker, more psychologically thriller type movie if it turns out Thanos didn't real the whole time.
That actually sounds kind of cool. Not gonna lie.
I mean, it would be a fucking horrifying and really good horror movie and everything, but you see how transposing that dynamic into real life is not like fit. For for Thanos, read the patriarchy. The feminists, the social justice types are obsessed with these vast conspiracies of evil tradcon evangelical patriarchs from yesteryear. And we come along and we tell them, good news, guys, you successfully vanquished into irrelevance the tradcon evangelicals of yesteryear and their family values. You can lay off the gas pedal now. You don't have to behave like rebels anymore. You've won. And they get offended at us for pointing that out, because they understand on some level, I think, that with great power comes great responsibility, and that if they won, they would have to use that power responsibly. So they need to convince themselves, against all evidence, that they're still the underdogs and they're still an evil villain to fight somewhere, so that they can continue doing increasingly more radical things.
Okay, moving on.
Yep.
Okay. Developers have approached Sarkisian over the years to express their regret and ignorance over including harmful stereotypes. Oh, you fucking idiots! You give someone
That's like
like if you give someone room, they walk all over you. Like to quote a
yeah,
really
especially
really funny.
when they're.
Please go ahead. I'll save it for the end. Please.
No, sorry, go. Go. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go.
Okay. Well, to quote a very funny YouTube channel called Super Mario Logan, the day you let somebody walk all over you, it's the day you become a bitch.
Well, there's that, and there's also the fact of, especially if it's moralists, especially puritanical moralists. It'd be okay. And I'm gonna use the Jack Thompson example again. It'd be like if in the 90s, when Jack Thompson was saying, "Won't somebody please think of the children?" the video game press and industry responded by literally removing every video game they had in development that had violence in it that could reasonably be expected to be impressionable on children. That's the equivalent of what has happened with Anita. She came up with her moral. She rolls in the dock with her moral ideology in tow and goes, "Your games are immoral because of this, because of reasons." And rather than telling Anita Sarkeesian what they told Jack Thompson back in the day, which is, "Fuck off, you useless little moralistic prick. Children are more resilient than you think they are, and you can't even demonstrate that these video games cause violence anyway." Or in her case, violence for sexism. But instead of doing that, instead of telling Anita, "Fuck off, you useless puritanical Harridan, your morality isn't the only sacrosanct thing in the fucking universe. People are wanting to have fun with our games." Instead of saying that, which would have been the sensible position, they said, "Oh, yes, yes, Lady Sarkeesian, we are immoral people, and your moral framework is totally unimpeachable and valid. Sorry," starts whipping south, "we'll remove all of the bad games that you tell us, and we'll design games specifically to your specifications. We'll spend the next 10 years groveling at your feet so that we can be morally good people at the end of the day. Derp." That's what they did when Anita came in the dock. When it was Jack Thompson, they rightfully told him to get fucked with your useless moralistic prickery. But when it was Anita, they dropped their pants and opened wide. That's why Gamergate happened, because in the 90s, a precursor to Gamergate did happen, but the industry was on the gamers' side against Jack Thompson because Jack Thompson was very obviously in the wrong. And then when Anita Sarkeesian swapped out violence for sexism and swapped out Christian talking points with feminist talking points, all of a sudden the entire script flips, even though it's the same goddamn argument. That's why Gamergate happened, because people saw that and went, "Hold on, you were on our side, industry, when it came to Jack Thompson. Why the fuck are you rolling over and playing dead for this bitch?" And instead of saying, "Well, we think, instead of saying, you're right, gamers, we didn't catch ourselves in the hypocrisy there, we're on your side again." Instead of doing that, they went, "Because Anita Sarkeesian's morality is more sacrosanct than Family Values' morality was somehow, even though it's the same argument from the opposite team." Moving on.
Right. Okay. Right. She said, "I'm not here to be your feminist priest and grant you absolution," Sarkeesian said, "but I am here to tell you that you can be better and you can do better, and that's how change happens."
So, in other words, you are functioning as a priest, just not one that ever gives indulgence or allows for absolution. So, in other words, in the old days, priests would at least say, "Do what I say and then you'll be free from sin." But Anita comes along and says, "Do what I say and you'll never be free from sin because I'm not going to let you off the hook, but you'll at least be better than you were if you do exactly what I say when I say it and nothing else." See, this is why people get so pissed off at you, Anita, because you think that by saying, "I'm not giving you absolution," that makes you better than the priest, but it in fact makes you worse than the priest, because the extremely strict evangelical priest says, "Do what I say and then you'll be a good person at the end." You say, "Do what I say in order to become a better person, but I'm not letting you off the hook." Do you not see how that's not better? That's in fact much worse, because it takes the good aspect of being a priest and removes it, instead of removing the bad aspect of being a priest, i.e., being more overly morally strict. You want to keep the clout and the pomp and circumstance of being a priest, with none of the obligations to actually use your power to help anyone, better anyone, or forgive anyone. That's why people have such a problem with you. Because frankly, the part of the priesthood that everyone would like to get rid of, including most Christians for that matter, is the morally judging and morally shaming parts. But
I,
you want to keep the morally judging and morally shaming parts and get rid of the eventually you'll earn forgiveness parts. That's kind of the wrong way around, Miss Sarkeesian, or should I say Saint Sarkeesian, Dame Sarkeesian in this case. God damn it.
right, okay, you know what? Angela said some stuff, and I do want to cover some of it, just like we are kind of halfway. So,
Yeah.
okay, okay. I'd be careful about killing the knight in the shining armor trope. You can make it less man is always doing it and woman gets it for being woman. But we can always use more people. Trying to be a hero if they don't do it in a stupid way.
Yeah, no, to be perfectly clear, I don't have a problem with either of these tropes, really. I'm fine with both of them existing because it seems like a system that makes perfect sense, i.e., if a person who is if a person we love that is vulnerable is in danger, we feel the obligation to do what's right and save them. That's perfectly justified.
You know what?
What I'm saying is if go ahead.
I was gonna no, please. Well, I was gonna say like a good example, I guess, of quote unquote the subversion of the Shining Knight trope. The subversion of the fantasy genre in overall is the first Shrek movie.
Yeah, the entire like main Shrek trilogy is very much about subverting this exact thing. Because then Charming shows up in the next movie and is like, I was promised, the princess in the tower, and the princess in the tower was gone by the time I got there. What happened? What, you mean an ogre saved her? What the hell?
Yeah. God, I love those movies. Specifically the first two. I haven't seen really the others. So
You haven't seen Shrek the Third?
no.
Oh, Shrek the Third is awesome. Shrek Forever After is shit and should be forgotten in the greatest dumpster fire in Hollywood history. But
I've heard that with Forever After. Anyway, do you want to finish your point or?
But yeah, Shrek the Third is actually I think probably my favorite of the three, and not just because it touches on our theory and shit.
Anyway, okay. They're trying to be a hero if they don't do it in a stupid way, and not in a stupid way implies to most things, so that doesn't count. This is why there are so many. The knight ignores the princess and runs off with the dragon memes.
Yeah, and ironically, there's kind of a turf war in the social justice sphere as to whether that's good or not. There's part of the social justice sphere that says that's good because yay, homosexuality and everything. But there's another part that says that's misogyny because it leaves the woman in the tower, and makes it seem like the woman is the bad guy, which again, what I was saying earlier was I don't really I don't really have a problem with the fairy tale, hero versus damsel trope existing, but if we're going to examine it or re-examine it, then the part that I feel like warrants more re-examining is probably the part where a man goes on a quest and slays a dragon and just gets kissed at the end. That my issue isn't his sacrifice is unworthy of her attention like the feminists seem to have it. My issue is you're telling me he goes on a quest and slays the dragon and all he gets is a kiss at the end? That seems rather lopsided on his part because it seems like he has to do more to buy her affection than she deserves.
Again, I'm going to bring up the Legend of Zelda Robot Chicken sketch that I brought up earlier.
Yeah, no, that's a very good way of doing that, by the way.
Yeah. Well,
Like
Zelda.
yeah, the trope. Go ahead.
Again, Zelda said that she's been rescued multiple times, and the first guy, she fucked his brains out. So, anyway, I like I said, I did want to get through these comments just because there are a lot of them. Okay.
Mhm.
I think this is when we talked about my age. Age is but a number for the papers. It's when shit happens that is important. Except with consent, of course, then age is pretty important. Okay.
Yeah.
They want to have their cake and eat it too. They are not oppressed and actually oppress others, but want to be treated like they are being oppressed, and the people they oppress are doing it, like punching someone and then they have to pay you damages.
Well, because they want to always be the virtuous victimized rebels fighting the patriarchy, because that means that they can do whatever extreme thing they want to topple the evil empire. But the second they win, they know on some level they have to be accountable to, with great power comes great responsibility. So the intuitive or subconscious solution to this is just don't ever realize we won, and then we get to keep acting like the rebels, even though we have all the power. But the second you manage to convince them that they actually have the power, they would feel obliged to use that power wisely, and they don't want to do that. So they convince themselves they're still the victims. So that way they can keep acting like the rebels, even though they have literally all the power. And that is why they went from virtuous rebels to out of touch aristocrats in the space of about a decade, because they still behave like they're the rebels while sitting in the imperial palace and controlling all the knights and all the king's men.
Okay.
And when royals act like rebels, we call that tyranny.
Moving on.
Rebels get to act more absurd because they have no power, but when people with power act that same way, it is totalitarian.
Moving on.
Yep.
Okay. They drop their pants for Anita because society has it in their heads that left equals good and right equals bad. Some people have an exception for communism, even though then many look at the USSR and say, "Come on, it's not that bad." Not like it's in or anything.
No, I don't think it's quite that partisan or that myopic. I think it's just because the social justice left won the argument back in the day. They are the one, much in the same way as for most of the 20th century, it was the evangelical Christian moral framework that was inside the Overton window. Now the moral framework that underpins the Overton window is the social justice framework to some degree or other. Um, and that's why the blind spot. Just like in the 40s and 50s, you couldn't convince any quote unquote right thinking good Christian that atheists were marginalized, even though they obviously were, or polytheists were marginalized, even though they obviously were. Now you can't convince a feminist that there are any such things as men's rights issues, and if there are, they must be their own fault. In the same way that a Christian back in the day viewed an atheist as well, if atheists have problems, it's obviously because they're atheists, right? Yeah, no, it's just because you have a moral blind spot because you can't see anyone who thinks differently from you as human for some reason. Because you're too the phrase too inside baseball comes to mind. You're too convinced that your moral framework is the only moral framework you'll ever need, that you don't even want to examine alternative moral frameworks for validity.
Right.
Moving on.
Yeah. All right. Trope. Sorry. Okay. Um, I think the strikes go down as time goes on. Would recommend the first three, especially the first two. More often than not, those nights, the night run off with the dragon memes, have the dragon be clearly female and thick, so both will find it problematic. Uh, I've never
Yeah,
seen
no,
the.
I've only seen versions of the memes where the dragon is obviously male and the knight and the dragon have a gay relationship, which probably says more about the parts of the internet I frequent than anything else, but whatever.
No, that's no surprise. Anyway, um, I don't think they would feel inclined to use that power wisely. Not everyone is some moral person. They just don't want to appear to others like they have the power, except
No, 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 no. Okay, no, 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 no. Don't do that. Dehum, don't dehumanize or demoralize your opposition. Do not do that. Remember Hanlon's razor. Never attribute to malice what can adequately be explained by incompetence. The reason why I propose that is because the entire social justice framework is about power. And every time a billionaire does something wrong, for example, I've seen um, social justice lefties on the internet say things like, with great power comes great responsibility. I'm not pulling that out of my ass. I'm using that because they themselves have shown that they know what you could call Stan Lee's razor. They know with great power comes great responsibility, which is why they have to convince themselves that they are the powerless underdogs, because they know on some intuitive level that if they were the ones in power, they would be obligated to use that power wisely. So they need to convince themselves on a subconscious level that they have no power, thereby developing a blind spot for any power that they have and overemphasizing any power that is not theirs. The entire social justice framework is power related because power is the ultimate um, means to whatever utopian ends they want. That's why social justice focuses so much on power and clout and cultural ubiquity and so on, because they know how power works. That's why they want it. They use power as the ultimate means to an end, and they also know that those in power should be obligated to use it wisely. Hence, they blind themselves to any power that they have and overemphasize any power that is not theirs, so that every single um, facet of civilization can be what we obviously have no power and we're the virtuous underdog rebels, so we can do whatever we want. It's those people over there who have all the power and aren't using it well. Therefore, help me overthrow those guys so that I'll have the power and then I'll use it wisely. And then when they win, what this power that I obviously have, it's not real power because reasons. There's still an evil Tradcon patriarchy out there somewhere, derp. So I need to use this power that I do have to overthrow them.
Okay. All right. Well, he did a response to you, and I feel like it's yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hamlon's razor only goes so far. At some point, evidence of these people being sadistic monsters comes into play. This is like the whole hold on, Dalton. This is like the whole everyone is the hero of their own story thing, about as foolish as tabula rasa or the communist utopia.
No, you're pulling special pleading is the problem. This is my problem. Whenever somebody makes exceptions um to why it's okay for them to use logical fallacies, they'll always think of some exception. Like the most egregious one I've discovered recently is a lot of academics have for some reason changed appeal to authority fallacy to appeal to unqualified authority, even though authority and qualification are basically synonymous and therefore beg their own question and is obviously special pleading. It's the same thing. Hanlon's razor doesn't have a limit. The only limit you want, the only reason you want a limit to be there is so that you can get away with using it without or is so that you can get away with violating it without repercussions. I don't play that game. Hanlon's razor is Hanlon's razor, and it stays. No exceptions, no mitigations. It is a logical fallacy, and I'm not gonna let people that are ostensibly on my side pull it just because they're ostensibly on my side. Stop special pleading. That is the number one logical fallacy that I want to eradicate, because special pleading is the one that makes other logical fallacies okay when we do it. You don't get to violate Hanlon's razor just because you have the right opinions. I'm sorry for being anal retentive about this, but this bothers me. Every time I see people make these arguments and then I point out, but Hanlon's razor, this is exactly what I always get told. But it's different because look at all this stuff they're doing. And I go, yeah, that could just as easily be attributed to sincere incompetence, and you're pulling special pleading post hoc justifications to try and justify it to yourself. Don't do that.
Okay. Moving on. Tropes and Sarkeesian herself have come to symbolize as so much for so many people in so many different ways, she said. In one hand, I hold trauma and fear and anger, and then on the other hand, I hold tremendous and enormous pride at the contribution that Tropes has made to the shifting tide of games culture.
Sorry, I'm reading what Dragon Turtle said. No, Dragon Turtle. The reason Hanlon's razor is there is not because of some general rule standard. The reason Hanlon's razor is there is because malice has to be demonstrated. It cannot just be assumed. No matter how reasonable you think the assumption is, malice is something you always have to prove. The burden of proof is on you to prove malice, not to appeal to some generalizing standard of, but after a certain point, no, fuck your certain point. That's the special pleading part. You have, no matter how absurd it seems, every instance of malice has to be demonstrated. It's like saying, well, this person has been convicted of stealing cars a bunch of times, so that means it's okay to randomly accuse them of murder. No, those are two different crimes. Just because someone has been, even if someone is known to have been malicious in certain ways before, that doesn't mean that every action they take is therefore accountable to malice. Each individual case of malice is a separate crime or a separate case of the same crime and has to be demonstrated, i.e., just because someone is convicted of one crime, we don't automatically assume them also guilty of every other criminal statute in the book. That's why there's such a thing as separate and specific charges when you take someone to court. Someone can be guilty of one thing but not guilty of other things. You have to prove each individual case to a reasonable doubt standard, or you fail, and it's otherwise special pleading. Yes, you can blame them after you prove it and demonstrate it, but you cannot just appeal to some sort of generalizing standard of, well, after a certain point. No, fuck your certain point. Prove it or fuck off. I'm sorry for being a stickler for this, but I will die on this hill if I have to. Logical fallacies are not general guidelines, they are hard and fast rules that sane, rational people must adhere to, or their brains are fucked. Period. Yes, but given how much less resources the average arguer on the internet has than the court system, I'm going to say that unless you can prove to at least a court's a or at the very least a civil court's level of satisfaction, then you don't get to claim it, and you don't get to again assume they've been convicted of 3 counts of arson, so obviously they also murdered someone. No, separate crimes require separate cases and separate burdens of proof, i.e., each individual case of malice has to be proven to a reasonable doubt standard, or you can fuck off. You don't just get to assume someone is guilty of a different crime entirely because they have done bad things in the past. I.e., when Derek Chauvin went to trial over the George Floyd thing, the SJWs were baying for his blood and wanted him to be found guilty on all charges. But several of the charges made no fucking logical sense, and so he only got convicted of doing certain things he was accused of. As well it should be. If the thing you're accusing them of makes no fucking sense or can't be reasonably demonstrated to be applicable, then you don't get to just throw it in on the basis of, well, we've already proven he's a bad guy, so he must have done other things that are bad, and we don't have to go through the process of proving those. No. No, that's not how this works. It's like the difference between somebody saying we can be certain that the elites do pedophilia, so that means we can also be certain that they're doing Satanism. Okay, no, those are two different things. Yes, we've caught them doing pedophilia, but there's no evidence at all that they're doing it for satanic reasons. There's evidence that they're doing it for hedonistic reasons of their own personal self satisfaction. So it's more reasonable to conclude that they're doing it for hedonistic reasons than it is to conclude that they're doing it for satanic reasons. But we caught them doing a bad thing, so can't we just accuse them of doing all the bad things? No. Moving on. Sorry, I completely derailed us by addressing Dragon Turtle, but it was a very important distinction that I had to make because this has been, and I'm sorry if I was too harsh on you there, Dragon Turtle. This has been a gripe I've had for a long time, and you just gave me an excuse to go off.
In one hand, I hold trauma and fear and anger, and then on the other hand, God damn it.
Hold the millions of dollars you extorted from people without telling them what it was going for, or telling them what it was going for and then not delivering, Anita.
In one hand, I hold trauma and fear and anger, and then on the other hand, I hold tremendous and enormous pride at the contribution that Tropes has made to the shifting tide of games culture.
The fact that games culture has acquiesced to you is to me no more justified than it acquiescing to Jack Thompson, because the arguments you make are virtually indistinguishable. And that I will judge you for, because that requires no malice on your part. You could just be entirely incompetent and morally backwards, which I'm perfectly fine with believing, because there's no imputation on you as a person because of that. I will morally impugn you as a person for the shit I can actually demonstrate you doing, like taking a bunch of money and then not providing the service that you rendered that money for. Because, evidence and things. And no, you can't be 100% certain, but you have to at least make the attempt every single time. You can't just assume, because as we all know, when you assume something, you make an ass of yourself and whoever you happen to be making the assumption about. Assumption is lazy philosophy and should be avoided when possible. Moving on.
Yeah. Uh, The nightmare that some gamers felt was ushering in a world in which devs lost their uncompromised artistic freedom uh, and sometimes actually had to tell stories about women as real human beings. Guess that came true. We won.
Anita, to the extent that characters can be real people, game companies have always done that. Always, Anita. Because here's the thing. Which of these characters strikes you as more human? The character whose well-being is the entire basis for the plot, or the character who nearly kills himself and often does because, the life system in video games is what it is, to save that other character. Which of these characters is more humanized? The character who literally has to work his ass off to get even so much as an acknowledgement from another character, or a character whose health, happiness, and well-being is the entire driving force of the plot? Because I would venture that of these two characters, the second is far more human. The character whose opinions, thoughts, and desires actually matter to the story, rather than just what the character is useful for as an appliance. That's the thing, Anita. If you're going to criticize this dynamic, you should at least criticize both halves of it. And if you're not going to criticize both halves of it, then you probably should point your gun at the part that is actually kind of a bigger problem. Because women being viewed as valuable, Anita, I know, I might be misogynist for saying this, but viewing women as valuable is not tantamount to hating them. But viewing male characters as only good based on what they do and never how they feel or think is kind of similar to hating them, because it means if you don't do what I want, then you're not a real person. It's basically the long and the short of it, Anita. Men have to do what society at large finds useful, in particular women, or they don't get to be real men. But women can just want things, and they're usually considered perfectly justified in everything they want. And if the world doesn't give what they want to them, it's considered to be an injustice. And oh, by the way, we'll send a bunch of men to their deaths in order to give you exactly what you want, my lady, because you are so important to us, don't you know?
Dalton.
Yeah. Moving on.
What's next? Although progress has been made, Sarkisian said the industry itself is nowhere near equitable. It was never just enough to talk about in-game representations, he said, pointing to ongoing revelations of abuse and worker mistreatment in games. This industry is drowning in trauma, abuse, and harassment as an industry. We are not okay, and we haven't been okay.
Demonstrate your harassment, please. Demonstrate your abuse, please. Demonstrate it to a reasonable, satisfactional conception of what those terms mean, and explain what makes your abuse any worse than anyone else's. Because
I think she was.
they've done.
I think she was referring to like the mistreatment of the workers on games by companies.
No, that she was referring to specifically women employees, if anything.
Well, so it counts as employees, and those guys get fucked over a lot.
I mean, sure, but if you're gonna make the standard, like, communist rights of the workers argument, which is a fair point in this case, it should apply to both genders of employee, not just the female one.
Yeah.
Yep, moving on.
Okay. Sorry. And that abuse doesn't stop with major CEOs at companies like Activision and Blizzard. Clearly, this industry is not yet prepared to truly reckon with these powerful men and the harm that they cause, she said. I mean, I know about the Blizzard thing, kind of. So technically not wrong, but I think the way she's viewing it is.
Again, it's not that I don't think that these are problems. It's that the it's the way that she's viewing it is completely lopsided and blind to certain genders of people. And notice how she didn't say powerful people when she was um talking about the guilty. She said powerful men, as though there are no female CEOs who do the exact same shit. Or female middle management, for that same matter, who misuse, for example, the highly stringent HR and PR um, systems. Moving on.
Yeah. It's happening in small studios too, because this isn't fundamentally a problem of money, it's a problem of power. The struggle is bigger than any one of us, Sarkeesian said, and involves everyone who cares about creating a better, safer, more inclusive gaming industry and gaming culture.
The problem is bigger than any one of us, so give me all the money and resources. Because let's drop the pretenses, Ms. Sarkeesian, for just a minute here. You may think and even you may say and even think in your heart of hearts that the problem is bigger than any one person, but you're still very comfortable with the idea of being at the top of that pyramid, aren't you? You still wouldn't if you had the option give up your millions of dollars for speaking engagements and the clout that you have with people in the industry to a group of the people in general. You still want it for yourself. You still aren't willing to give back all that money you extorted from people in Kickstarters and every other thing, are you, Ms. Sarkeesian? You're you're fine with it being bigger than everyone but you, as long as you get to be the top of the pyramid, aren't you, Miss Sarkeesian? Moving on.
Right. Okay. So this is another article. Don't want me to wanted to cover. It's the archive version of.
Are we not doing the video?
No, no. I just kind of want to get through this one, honestly.
Okay.
I'm getting tired. Like full disclosure. So.
Yep.
Okay. So.
Well, I guess save the video for next time.
Nope.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is originally from ScreenRant.com. The Stands, Las Vegas, but this is obviously the archive version. The Stands, Las Vegas missed the point of Randall Flagg. When the 2020 remake of The Stand remade Randall Flagg's Las Vegas as a perpetual party, the miniseries inadvertently sided with the Stephen King villain by Cathal Gunning, published July 24th, 2021.
Oh, okay. So, backstory time. I recently, as in like a couple weeks ago, just finished Stephen King's uncut version of The Stand, which is like 300 pages longer than the original Stand that he published in like 1974. Which is actually the version that he wanted to publish originally, but the editors cut it down, and then when it sold like gangbusters, they were like, actually, it turns out that longer version you wanted to make could make us a bunch of money, so feel free to do that. And he was like, okay. And I've also seen recently the 1994 remake, the 1994 adaptation of The Stand, which was a TV movie from back in the day, and I'm about halfway through the remake. It's taking forever because for some reason, despite the fact that um, the book itself and the other adaptation itself have fuck off numbers of characters, they still felt it necessary to tell the story out of order and do flashbacks and flash forwards for some reason, and it makes it nigh impossible to get through. Um, but I have just recently read The Stand, which I highly recommend that everyone does because, especially in a post-pandemic world, um, The Stand hits really, really personal material pretty quickly there. But anyway, suffice it to say that Flag's Las Vegas has always been a party because that's part of what Flag does. Flag isn't interested in causing people pain just for the lulz or causing people pain in general. He's interested in the long game spiritual battle. So he makes his kingdom as appealing as possible so that people are more willing to come to it, i.e., he wants his civilization to be good because then people will acquiesce to it more, and then he can do basically whatever he wants. He's a little bit like Dr. Facilier in Princess and the Frog. He's gonna make his in the same way as Facilier wanted to make New Orleans a hedonistic paradise so that people would damn their souls inadvertently. So too, Flag wants his Vegas to be a hedonistic paradise so that more people buy into it. And then in the long term, he gets more souls for an entity known as the Crimson King, who is basically, for all intents and purposes, the devil. It I don't want to go too deep into lore, especially because this is just the subheading. But suffice it to say, Flag doesn't care from whence he gets the chaos that he causes, as long as um, he ultimately gets souls for the Crimson King. So if he can damn you by giving you everything you want, then quite honestly, I think he prefers doing that because it's fairly consistent with his character that his method of evil is I'll give you everything you want and let you damn yourself with it, which is often the modus operandi of a lot of Stephen King's villains, especially the nigh omnipotent gentleman trickster devil characters, because Stephen King has a love for nigh omnipotent wandering trickster devil characters that almost exceeds mine, which is saying something. Moving on. So,
Okay. All right. 2020's The Stand miniseries screwed up a lot of elements from Stephen King's source novel, but the mishandling of Randall Flagg's Las Vegas is particularly egregious. This 2020, The Stand was the second big budget adaptation of horror icon Stephen King's doorstopper novel of the same name, where some King adaptations like Lizzy's story owe their inspiration to the author's real life. The Stand was a fantasy horror story with a more epic scope. A post-apocalyptic story, The Stand follows two groups of survivors attempting to rebuild civilization after a pandemic wipes out much of the planet. The story may seem poorly timed given the events of 2020, but the problems of the miniseries reach deeper than mere poor taste.
okay, stop. Okay, already wrong. I agree that the 2020 Stand is a fucking dumpster fire mostly, but Flag's Las Vegas really wasn't part of that. But fuck the implication that because the world is going through a real life pandemic, we can't make any stories about pandemics. That's exactly when you want to make stories about pandemics, you idiots, because then people actually have a point of reference to relate to it. And that's a recipe for an instant classic. In fact, that's my biggest problem with 2020's The Stand, because they had a literal, actual pandemic that they could have pulled inspiration from as the backdrop and make an instant classic that everyone would remember that would have been almost as good as the book. And somehow they didn't manage to, even though this is the one time in human history, or at least, our lifetime, that people would be able to most relate to The Stand. Case in point, I read The Stand and found it extremely cathartic because the characters in The Stand were going through the exact same feelings that I was going through regarding the pandemic. I know this is going to break a lot of intelligentsia's, the academic elite's brains, but generally speaking, people don't want to be sheltered from stories that they find relatable. They actually want to be told, by the way, this is something that we're all going through and you're not going crazy. They don't want to be sheltered away from stories that have to deal with pandemics. They want to think to themselves, this is a major historical event that I'm living through. I wonder how it will impact storytelling and whether that will give me any emotional catharsis or anything at all. So already the person who wrote this article is absolute bang to right opposite of the goddamn truth. What you should have done, Hollywood, is bank on pandemic related stories because that would have been something people could actually relate to. You pricks.
Okay.
Moving on.
Giant Troll System things. I don't know. It sounds like that is a really good way to date something, making it about current events. I mean,
No, if it's not okay. It's not about current events. It's about because Stephen King wrote The Stand in 1974 and set it in 1990. What I'm saying is it would have offered emotional catharsis for people living through the pandemic because, and I'm again using my own data as a point of reference here. One of the things that I love about Stephen King's The Stand and why I'm glad I waited as long as I did to read it, despite the fact that my friend Nick has been badgering me to read it for a decade. Hi, Nick, if you ever watch this, which I'm gonna send this to him when we're done, so that he gets to see because me and my buddy Nick actually had a long, like hours long conversation about this. But the reason why I'm glad I waited as long as I did to read it was because when I read it, I was stunned by, despite the fact that Stephen King never had to live through such a pandemic, he got the dynamics banged to right accurately. And it was stunning to the point that when the trademark Stephen King supernaturalism started happening, I almost was like, aw, because I was more interested for once, and Brainstormer knows how rare this is, in the shit that the characters were thinking and the things the characters were going through. Granted, that lasted all of 5 seconds because I love me some Randall Flagg because birds of a feather flock together, and I consider Flagg kind of a kindred spirit to myself. But because I've often joked that I'm basically the internet's answer to Randall Flagg, and I'm sticking by that. But that being said, there was a moment where I was actually more interested in the in watching the aftermath of the uh, pandemic that's referred to as Captain Trips play out than I was in what Mother Abigail and Flagg were doing. Granted, everything is better with Randall Flagg or a Randall Flagg-like character, which is one of the reasons why I've read a lot of Stephen King recently because, like I say, Stephen King loves the wandering gentleman trickster devil trope almost as much as I do, and that's saying something because that's basically my life goal is to be that kind of character. um, yeah, moving on.
The Stand's 2020 retelling was plagued by confusing storytelling, pointless subplots, and unnecessary alterations to key characters. In the Stephen King novel and 1994 miniseries, The Stand's villain, Randall Flagg, is a fascist despot as well as a supernatural demon, and he rules Las Vegas with an iron fist. His word is law, as many
Okay,
unfortunate. find out when they are caught indulging in forbidden vices like drugs and alcohol, and publicly crucified. I had to finish the sentence.
Okay, most of that paragraph was wrong. One, Flag is not a fascist because he couldn't begin to care to give a fuck about fascism. Couldn't begin to give a fuck. Two, Flag is not a demon. He's a quasi-immortal, yes, but he's a quasi-immortal human sorcerer. And third of all, apart from the crucifying people who are unproductive thing, he doesn't really rule with an iron fist. He's actually, like I said, killing people with kindness is kind of his thing. The I'll give you everything you want, and then you'll damn yourself with it. Is very much Flag's approach. He's very much a supernatural drug dealer. He'll give you exactly what you want or what you need at exactly the right moment to damn your soul forever. That's Flag's thing. I'll give you exactly what you want at exactly the right moment, and now you're damned forever and ever and always. So yeah, but more to the point, how I came to the conclusion that Randall Flagg does not give a fuck about fascism at all, and couldn't even begin to give a fuck about fascism, is because when Flagg is introduced in the novel, in chapter 23, one of the first things said about him is Randall Flagg has a pamphlet for every pamphlets for all seasons and rhetoric for all reasons, i.e., he will say whatever he has to. He will side with whatever cause he needs to create existential chaos, often in the form of actually being super nice to people and giving them exactly what they want. Because he couldn't give a fuck about petty human problems. He's an immortal sorcerer whose only main goal in life is to cause as much random chaos as possible. So he will literally argue for one thing 1 minute and argue the exact opposite the next decade hence, so that the maximum amount of random existential chaos is the end result, up to and including being very nice to people. So yeah, Flagg doesn't care about fascism because Flagg only uses the rhetoric of fascism for the purpose of, does this get my supernatural chess game going? That's the whole reason he's opposed to Mother Abigail. It's not even because she's Christian. If Flagg thinks that fundamentalist Christianity is the best way of fomenting disaster in people, he'll become a firebrand preacher in the space of a millisecond. The only reason why he cares about Mother Abigail and her Christianity bothers him is because she is getting in the way of his supernatural ultimate end goal of building a civilization that is entirely devoted to the Crimson King, so that he can rule over it. He doesn't even have a problem with hedonism, as I said. Usually, his end goal is, I'm going to give people hedonistic pleasure and then completely fuck them over with it, and let them destroy themselves. Because this happens with a lot of Stephen King's villains. The way that most Stephen King villains, especially the wandering trickster devil gentleman types, is, I'm going to let you destroy yourself, and I won't even have to lift a finger. And then by the time you realized it was all my doing, I'll be gone and wandering again, ready, willing, and able to foment the exact same thing over and over again. The best day for Flagg is a day where he doesn't even have to fire a shot. The only reason he cares about hedonism in relation to the settlement he's building in Las Vegas is because he wants to build a civilization, and he knows that hedonism gets in the way of building civilization, so he opposes it only as far as the civilization gets built. After the civilization gets built, everything is a party because it's nicer for him, it's nicer for the people, and it ultimately gets his end goal. That's why he picks Las Vegas, because Las Vegas is what? Sin City. And he wants to build Las Vegas back up so that it can be basically nonstop debauchery. But in order to get to the state of we've rebuilt society and it's about nonstop debauchery and hedonism, he has to crucify a few drug dealers so that they can actually build the civilization again.
Okay, Dragon Turtle brought up interest point just now. How does hedonism lead people to people worshiping the Crimson King?
Because God in the Stadium King universe is an entity named Gan, and Gan is all about people's higher nature. So like ethics, philosophy, morality, etc. And so if Flag can distract, it's essentially the greatest trick the devil ever pulled with convincing the world he didn't exist thing, whereby all I need to do to damn you is to keep you from worrying about things like morality and salvation. So I'm gonna make the world as fun and funny and pleasurable and satisfying as I can, so that you never think to worry about petty little things like morality.
Right. As anyone took his deals but not fell into the trap, perhaps the trickster equivalent of a pot shot, something to lure more people in, or someone legitimately getting one over on him.
Does that happen with Flag? To some extent, in the chronologically first novel he shows up in, which is called The Eyes of the Dragon, he spends most of that book doting over the bad king Tommy, because as per usual, Flag prefers to play the advisor role and again give people what they want and let them doom themselves. And he basically thinks that the King Tommy is stupid and will just do whatever he says. And he gets so overconfident that he eventually says this to the other prospective king, King Peter, and Tom overhears him and realizes that he's been had, and then shoots Flag with a arrow that's been heated with dragon fire, which is basically what you have. It's in order to even harm Flag, you have to do stupid levels of damage to the dude. Like at the end of the stand, he gets nuked, and he just gets up and walks away. And no, I'm not even exaggerating. He literally gets nuked. And in the case of Eyes of the Dragon, gets shot with an arrow infused with dragon fire.
There's one earlier. He isn't a born immortal, right? He was made immortal by his own hand, no less.
Yeah, he was made immortal by the fact that he got very, very good at magic and became an immortal.
Okay. Alright, moving on. This power is what leads characters like the Trash Can Man to devote their lives to Flag, with his followers seeing him as a stand-in for God in their new world. In case the on-the-nose symbolism of crucifying misbehaving citizens was not clear enough, the point of Flaggers of Las Vegas is that the characters represent uber-conservative far-right religious zealots like many of King's famous villains.
Okay. One, Mother Abigail is a born-again black Christian from like the early 1900s. And she is the good one in the duality of the stand. Two, once again, Flag doesn't care what he has to say to get you on board. It just matters to him that you're on board. If fundamentalist Christianity is what does it, then fundamentalist Christianity he will use. If being a grand wizard, haha, in the KKK does it, then he'll do that. In fact, there's literally references to him doing exactly that in the um in the in like the Reconstructionist era. He reminisces about that time he was in the KKK. Um, Flag is not supposed to be a religious figure. Like I said, his whole thing is I'm gonna make a civilization that's so fun and pleasurable and so much a nonstop party that you won't care that you're technically damned. I'm gonna give you everything you want, and you're going to owe your loyalties to me, so you're never going to worry about silly little things like coming to my god, basically. But where the fuck did you get the idea that Flag is supposed to be a religious figure? Like, he's literally the closest thing Stephen King maybe ever made to the devil. I mean, you could make arguments for people like Leland Gaunt in Needful Things being more a honest to goodness devil than Flag, because Gaunt is a literal demon, whereas Flag is just a very powerful immortal sorcerer. Um, but there's literally goes to a um a kid who is deaf and mute named Nick Andros. He's actually one of my favorite characters. And by the way, Hollywood, if you want to see how you do a disabled character right, look at Nick Andros as a character. Um, but he goes to Nick Andros, this kid who is deaf and mute, and he literally says, um, I will give you all the riches of the world if you will fall on your knees and worship me," which is almost a word for word translation of what Lucifer says to Jesus in the Bible during the 40 days of wandering. So I don't know where you got the idea that Flag is religious. If anything, his use of crucifixion is supposed to be a reference to ancient Rome. Because again, he's been around a bit. A very, very long bit. He probably waxes lyrical about crucifying people during Nero's administration as the Roman emperor. That's the reference that's supposed to be made. He's building a new version of ancient Rome, complete with the debauchery. But you would know that if you actually bothered to look at the stand from its own internal logic rather than the logic that you're projecting onto it for political reasons, Derp. Which, by the way, is exactly the kind of mentality that Flag loves to make use of. Which again, Flag has pamphlets for all seasons and rhetoric for all reasons. This partisanship you're doing is exactly the kind of shit that characters like Randall Flagg love to put on strings and use you like a puppet. So well done. By saying that this makes Flagg look like the good guy, you probably just sold your soul to Flagg. Funny how that works. Yeah. Moving on.
Okay. 2020 miniseries The Stand, however, reimagined this character's version of Las Vegas as a den of unbridled debauchery, and proved Flag right as a result.
You've literally fallen for his con. I can't believe it. You literally are the test case for exactly what Flag loves to do. Like if he were here right now, he would be laughing himself silly at the opportunity you just handed him on a silver platter. I can't believe. Oh my god! Like this is like I sort of hope that the Stephen King multiverse actually exists so that somewhere in some universe Flag can be watching this.
Dragon
But
Turtle.
god damn it.
Dragon Turtle says, to be fair, do we know the director wasn't doing that? The director of Star Troopers was trying to paint the Federation as fascist.
Okay, maybe the director was stupid enough to portray Flag as a fascist, but the writer of the article is making the argument that other versions of the Stand treated Flag more like a fascist, and this version of Flag is less like a fascist, and that makes him the good guy in their mind somehow. And I'm like, this is literally the exact thing that Flag always plays on. By by give by giving you the 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 sensuous hedonistic pleasures you want, uh, you won't care that you're damned. And also I'll have fun along with you, which is the other thing. Flag and I'm gonna literally put on my sympathy for Flag hat here. Um Flag isn't a completely heartless monster. He doesn't mind if you're having he doesn't want to see you suffer for the sake of suffering. Suffering gives him power in the sense that literally before the Stand, he didn't have enough excess energy to work his magic, and then literally at the end of chapter 23, he realizes his magic is coming back after a couple centuries, and he's super over the moon about it. But he doesn't he doesn't actually want you to be in pain. He wants you to be distracted by how much fun you're having so that you don't worry about um the white, quote unquote, which is the equivalent of the white god in Dresden Files for the Stephen King universe, which is Gan and Matern and a couple other entities that I can't think of off the top of my head. But there are a couple entities that basically um, sort of have rotating roles as the god of the Stephen King multiverse. Um, the most common one is Gan, but another one is a giant turtle called Matern, who we see in It as the counterpart to Pennywise. Um, but Flag's ploy is if I let you have all the hedonistic fun you want, then you won't want higher pleasures. So it won't matter that you're damned to you if I just let you have all the fun. But in the case of the Stand, he has a civilization to rebuild. So for the briefest point in time, he has to keep people on task so that they can build his hedonistic utopia. And then once the hedonistic utopia is built, then it can crash and burn. And by the time it crashes and burns, Flag will already be miles away. Because again, that's what Stephen King's devils love to do most often is I'm gonna give you what you want and let you damn yourself. And then by the time you realize you've been had, I'll be off doing it again in the next town over or the next country over or whatever. Which is what Flag literally does at the end of the expanded version of The Stand, in which it's made very clear that he survives. He goes off to Africa and becomes the god of a tribe of natives.
Okay, well, we're nearly at the end. Okay, so Flag, nothing personal, kid. It's just business. Uh, then he says, like turtle, which I think was a reference to when he was speaking to about the deities. And BDW, is the turtle actually dead?
Matern the turtle, no, I don't think is actually dead. I think that was Pennywise being a dick. Um, but that's a Stephen King devil for a different day. Moving on though.
Not only did this element of the new adaptation of The Stand diverge from the book, but it also made Vegas seem less scary and more chaotic. Moreover, this choice also unintentionally reinforced the original Flag's worldview that anyone trying to rebuild society must abstain from drinking, drugs, and promiscuity. to maintain their integrity and obey the leader with a clear head.
That's not his worldview. That's the worldview he's using to get one over on people. Again, he literally couldn't begin to care less about mortal concerns. He's been an immortal sorcerer for at least 1,000 years by the time of the stand, and he fully expects to be doing this for the next couple thousand years too. He will say whatever he has to as long as it gets his end away. And just so we're clear, it's made very clear in the book that the reason he chose Las Vegas is because he wants to rebuild it in all its sinful glory. In other words, the minute the construction of Vegas is done and everything is running smoothly again, he'll say, "Good news, guys. Um, the reason we chose Vegas was so we could party after we built it, and we just finished building it. So everybody, drinks and blow and drugs and everything are on me. Go nuts, guys." And then he waits for people's own human nature to get in their own way, burn down the city, and then by the time everyone goes, "Hey, where did Flag go? He was the one who was supposed to be in charge of all of this and keeping order and everything." He'll be like, "Oh, sorry, you see you see the sun was in my eyes, and I bye, ha 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 ha." Like he literally was going to commemorate the birth of his son, which he's in the process of waiting for in the book because he pulls the Rosemary's Baby thing and basically conceives the Antichrist with a woman named Nadine Cross, who incidentally in the new miniseries is played by Amber Heard, and that was the one moment where I'm like, Flag, my dude, from one wandering gentleman trickster devil to another, never stick your dick in crazy. Any character played by Amber Heard is unworthy of you, dude. But that's neither here nor there. He gets a baby in Nadine, and that baby is basically going to be the Antichrist, and he's basically planning on commemorating the birth of his Antichrist child with a big party. So yeah, no, Flag doesn't give the minorest of shits about hedonism apart from it's getting in the way of building this place where we'll all be able to have a big party forever. And then you'll eventually destroy yourselves, and I'll wander away going, haha, I fooled you. Sorry, guys, but I have all your souls now, yoink. That's that's literally his plan. His plan is get Nadine, rebuild Las Vegas, have baby, have giant party in rebuilt Las Vegas, wait for humans to destroy themselves, wander away giggling with Sun, probably. That it's basically the bullet point version of Flag's entire plan.
Right. You know?
Yeah.
All right. By depicting Las Vegas as a party city with no rules and no apparent ruler, 2020's version of The Stand argued for the original Flag's claim that people needed harsh and brutal discipline lest they descend into barbarism. It's a brutal and cruel way to see power, but one that the 2020 miniseries proves right when Flag City falls apart thanks to its loose structure and splintered groups of survivors constantly infighting.
It was always going to do that, and it did that in the book too. It's because Flag gets so high off of the chaos that he causes that he often becomes short-sighted. That's usually how Flag loses. Is he gets so giggly that he won before he basically he basically does his end zone dance before the game is over, and it always ends up biting him in the ass. He like in Eyes of the Dragon, he thinks he has Thomas wrapped around his little finger, and then Thomas overhears him bragging about it, and then he goes, "Well, shit, I've been had. Eat, 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 dragon fire infused arrow, you jackass," and then he loses. Or in The Stand, Nadine overhears him saying, "I don't care about her at all. I just want the kid," and then she jumps off a balcony, and kills herself and the baby. Like this is how it always comes undone for Flag is he has a good plan, but he gets overly excited because he can see the finish line and starts letting his mask slip too early, and then people go, "Wait a minute, you mean we were gonna be doomed all along?" And he goes, "Well, yeah, but it was fun while it lasted, wasn't it?" "Well, yeah, but now fuck you, Flag." And then, oh dear, this I didn't see this coming, even though this is how I lose literally all the time. Because this is the other thing about Stephen King in and his understanding of immortality. Because immortality implies the freedom from being changed, it also means repeating the same mistakes over and over again. Because if you never change, then you also never learn from your mistakes, really. And you'll often fall into the same mistakes over and over.
Giant Turtle sounds like the leftists go mask off before they seal the deal.
Again, I don't feel it's justified or even accurate to bring politics into this because Randall Flagg doesn't care and will never care about human politics. He's seen empires rise and fall so many times that he basically he's literally to the point now where when Rome fell, he was probably just sitting there with a whatever the ancient Roman equivalent of popcorn was, reclined and being like, "Oh, he is literally the kind of person who not only is watching Nero fiddle while Rome burns, he probably handed Nero the fiddle and was like, "Here, Your Excellency, why don't you play us a song?" "Yeah, but isn't the city on fire?" Don't worry about it, I'll get it. Don't you trust me?" And then of course Nero goes, "Yes, I do, Flag," or I guess in this case Flagus. Um, give me that violin. "As you wish, Your Excellency." Moving on.
Right,
And then he doesn't proceed to do anything about the fire.
I'll read that in a second, Jennifer. Give me a sec. Not only that, but despite being played by a similarly famous Skarsgård sibling, the Stan's Randall Flagg was no Pennywise, and few fans of King found this villain to be particularly scary or threatening.
Okay, but that's the thing about Flag generally is he doesn't he doesn't need your fear. By the time he shows up, he's already dined on your fear. What he needs is for you to let your guard down and just have a little fun and then destroy yourself because human nature ultimately inevitably destroys itself. And then voila. And then he and whoever he's with is like, sorry it went horribly wrong, guys. I know I said I'd have your back, but as it turns out, I'm evil. Mwahaha. And then he walks away into the distance while giggling up a storm. This is this is the difference between Pennywise and Flag. They both feed on fear, as evidenced by the fact that for a couple centuries before the stand, while Flag maintained his immortality, he didn't have the majority of his powers. And then how he essentially knows that the plague got released, apart from the fact that it's heavily implied that he had something to do with it, was he snapped his fingers and realized he could levitate again, and he was so happy that he had his magic back that he literally was just dancing in the air for a bit.
Uh, the decision to turn his version of Vegas into a sinful free-for-all likely contributed to this, as there is little less scary than a supposedly threatening leader who lets his followers run amok. This change meant that any real-life parallels, whether to far-right politicians or extremist groups, were lost by Flagg being a permissive, uncaring leader like his inspirations. Stan got a lot of Stephen King's story wrong, but this may have been the biggest misstep the Mysteries made all along.
Okay, but this is the problem. You didn't actually read the book, is the problem. Because him being permissive and letting people destroy themselves at their own volition is exactly a perfect description of Flag. Yes, he also crucifies some drug addicts and things. Number one, mostly because he's amused by the idea of crucifixion, because again, my money is on him being nostalgic for the days of ancient Rome, but because Flag is fuck off immortal, but also he only cares about the drug addicts not toking up while they're building the city. Once they build the city, he's gonna be the one to hand out the needles. It's the same thing with the character of the Trash Can Man. The character of the Trash Can Man is a guy with a mental disorder whose only joy in life is committing acts of arson, like burning shit to the ground and shit. Um, and he actually Flag actually calls the Trash Can Man to Vegas specifically so he can quote set you to burn, i.e., he wants somebody in his camp who knows how to commit arson and burn shit to the ground. He just needs them to wait a little bit while they're building the city, and then once the city is built, he's gonna send the Trash Can Man over to Mother Abigail settlement with a nuke and be like, "Psych, boink." Yeah. So even not only are you wrong and you didn't read the book, but you didn't even pay attention to the parts of the book that you do understand, because if you know the Trash Can Man, you know that the reason Flag wants him so badly is because the Trash Can Man is very good at burning things. And he wants somebody who's very good at burning things, just not right just this second. But he still considers the Trash Can Man to be like his number 2 or 3 disciple, because he'll be extremely useful when it comes time for the burning things to the ground portion of the program. We're just not at that point yet. So I'm going to crucify these drug addicts now and then make it up to them by giving them drugs later. Yay.
Right, so moving on to the last thing.
Yep.
Well, the first Dragon Turtle. So, like vampires, they often seem to be depicted as suffering from the same character/personality flaws. Neither can improve them or struggle to.
Well, Flag is very cognitively smart, i.e., he learns from his mistakes, but he doesn't really engage in personal growth, so he ends up inadvertently kind of falling backwards into the same kind of mistake over and over. Like he'll learn, oh, this was the wrong thing to do in this situation, and then hypocritically fall backwards into the same flaw over again.
Right. Okay. Not to mention, he isn't just immortal, but also can hop dimensions easily.
Yeah, there's that.
Yeah. Does he ever use sorcery to trick people, or maybe more technical means like falsifying documents or something, or just use a silver tongue and charisma?
Uh, it's a bit of both, because Flag is very much a charisma caster, for lack of a better word. Like, okay, one of the most overt bits of magic we see early on, apart from the "oh yay, my magic's back, I'm gonna levitate" thing, which is when we first see him use it in chapter 23 when he's introduced to the sand. And I don't know what chapter that is in the abridged version. I'm going off of the uncut version that Stephen King originally wanted to publish, because why would I read the abridged version when the unabridged version is out there? But the first big use of magic we see him actually employ is for a guy by the name of Lloyd Henry, who's a guy who, through a series of incompetent screw ups, winds up on death row for murder, and then the plague hits and everyone dies, including the jailers, and he doesn't get let out of his cell. So um, Lloyd ends up nearly starving to death. And then along comes Flag and offers him a hot meal and the key to the cell. Now, mind you, this cell is an electronic cell with no physical key. But sure enough, Flag manifests a physical key in the form of a mystical black stone, which he later gives to both Lloyd and all of his other high-ranking generals, basically. And he manages to open the key, open the door by essentially burning a hole through it with sorcery. Um, so yeah, Flag is very much a charisma-based caster. But once again, for the record, because I missed the last half of that point while I was ranting. Again, Flag doesn't care about fascism or right wingness or anything else. In fact, he uses those petty, myopic, partisan bullshit fixations that people have to manipulate them. So that's why Flag should never be a stand-in for real world right wing or left wing or any other kind of political actor, because Flag isn't a political actor. He's a political opportunist when he needs to be for the ultimate cosmic win of I've offered a bunch of people souls inadvertently to the Crimson King, and also I had fun. So yay. Because lest we forget that once again, Flag prefers to manipulate people by giving them what they want, mostly because if everyone around him is being a hedonistic bastard, he gets to partake too. And he would rather he never have to experience any pain if he can avoid it. Moving on though.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Moving on to our last article of the night. This is from DC.com or DCComics.com. Remembering Neal Adams is published April 29th, 2022. So yeah, Neal Adams, the one of DC's big name artists from the past, did pass away.
And I feel like I owe him an apology posthumously, because me and my buddy Anglin frequently made fun of Neal Adams because the man was absolutely politically warped, especially in the last few years, i.e. the Trump era. Dude had not just Trump derangement syndrome, but he basically seemed to believe every social justice talking point about everything. And me and Anglin created what we termed as the internet's favorite game show, Shit Neal Adams Says, whenever he would do one of his warped Twitter rants. And I don't know how he died, but if it had any mental component to it, I feel bad now for possibly having made jokes about a guy who was literally mentally ill for the last few years. And I'm sorry, posthumously, Neal Adams. You may have actually been a developmentally disabled person, or at least not sane the last few years. And if that contributed in any way to your death, I'm sorry for laughing at your stupidity. Because I thought it was just run of the mill stupidity, not actual like diagnosable mental illness. So whoops.
Right.
Moving on though.
Yeah. Okay, so DC joins the world in mourning the loss of Neal Adams, one of the most acclaimed artists who have contributed to the comic book industry. DC publisher-in-chief creative officer Jim Lee, who has drawn quite a few Batman stories of his own, said Neal Adams was an amazing illustrator. He changed comics. I loved his take on Batman. It was lithe, aerobatic, and dynamic. Neal's work continues to inspire me. This is a huge loss for the entire industry. I do feel like I should mention this. I have seen his art. I unfortunately have never been able to read any of the comics that he has helped worked on. So I like I said, I'm aware of Neil Adams, but I unfortunately do not have like a um, gauge on this, if that makes any sense. Like, it's sad, obviously, what happened, but I'm not like overly distraught. I guess if I had more context of it, I
Hmm.
suppose. Um. Anyway, moving on.
Yep.
Okay. Born June 5th, 1941, Neil received his art training at the School of Industrial Arts in New York City. His first big success came at the age of 21 when he started drawing the Ben Casey syndicated newspaper strip in 1967. Neil came to DC Comics, where he drew covers for War Comics and contributed stories to The Adventures of Jerry Lewis and The Adventures of Bob Hope.
Bob Hope had a comic. I didn't know that actually.
I didn't either. His big break came 1 year later when he started drawing Batman. Zara showed a natural affinity for the Dark Knight, and in 1970, DC editor Julius Schwartz uh, assigned the Batman comics to Neil and writer Dennis O'Neil.
Hmm.
Um, that was followed by the pair's groundbreaking 13-issue run on Green Lantern, an iconic series of books that tackled previously untouched but socially relevant issues like racism, ecology, and drug abuse. Wait, the Green Lantern and Green Arrow book, like,
Yeah, that was when Green Arrow was established to be an old lefty, unquote.
uh, in 1972, Neil turned to advertising illustration, but he occasionally returned to DC, notably illustrating a popular Superman versus Muhammad Ali comic book in 1978 and New Superman and Batman series in 2012 and 2016. Uh, with deep respect for Neil and his tireless work and great love for the comics industry, we extend our condolences to his family and friends. I don't have anything to say, honestly.
No, like I said, my main contribution to this was just the apology for possibly beating up on a mentally ill person all those times.
Um, okay, so here we have some of his art. It's very classic, actually. Like, I've seen a lot of these covers before. Yeah, the world has really lost lost a great artist and good person, I'm sure.
Although to be fair, it lost him a couple of years ago because like I said, I genuinely think in retrospect that he may have actually had mental issues in the last couple of years. So if it turns out that his opinions expressed on Twitter in the last couple of years were not just being really, really politically warped and stupid like I thought, but are actually the result of him literally losing his mind, I am sorry. But that being said, it's it's worse, I think, in many ways to outlive your mind because because it might be better off you might be better off dying when your brain dies because then people can remember the brilliant person you used to be. Whereas if you outlive your mind, all people can say is this person used to be such a genius and now they are basically at the developmental level of an infant, and it's tragic.
Anyway, I don't really have anything else anymore to say. So, with that, folks, I want to say goodbye, adios, aloha, avitase, sayonara, peace, cheers, and
R.I.P. Neil Adams. Sorry for all the jokes and fuck off.